Ford, Leary, and the boys would like to tell you the story of Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego.
Shadrach, Shadrach.
There were three children from the land of Israel.
Shadrach,
Meshach, Abednego. They took a trip to the land of Babylon.
Shadrach,
Meshach, Abednego. Nebuchadnezzar was the king of Babylon.
Shadrach,
Meshach, Abednego. Took a lot of gold and he made an idol.
Shadrach,
Meshach, Abednego. And he told everybody when they heard the music of the cornet. And he told everybody when they heard the music of the clarinet. And he told everybody when they heard the music of the horn. You must bow down and worship the idol Shadrach,
Meshach, Abednego.
but the children of Israel would not bow down, not Shadrach.
Meshach, Abednego.
You couldn't fool them with no golden idol Shadrach.
Meshach, Abednego.
The king put the children in the fiery furnace.
Oh, Shadrach,
Meshach, Abednego, heap on the coals and the red hot brimstone.
Shadrach,
Meshach, Abednego, 7 times hotter, hotter than a daughter.
Shadrach,
Meshach, Abednego, burned up the soldiers that the king had put there. Shadrach, Meshach, Abednego. But the Lord sent an angel with snowy white wings down in the middle of the furnace,
yeah.
talking to the children about the power of the gospel.
Shadrach, Meshach, Abednego.
Couldn't even harm a hair on the head of Shadrach.
Meshach, Abednego.
Laughing and talking while the fires had jumping.
Shadrach, Meshach, Abednego.
Oh, Nebuchadnezzar called.
Oh, yeah.
When he saw the power of the Lord, and they had a big time in the house of Babylon.
Shadrach, Meshach, Abednego. Shadrach, Meshach, Abednego. Shadrach, Meshach, Abednego. Shadrach. ועל הנביא יחזקאל, אלך אחריו אם תמיד ומקל, אל כל מקום שאותנו יביא, הנביא יחזקאל הוא בומבה של נביא, אל יחזקאל, אל יחזקאל, אל יחזקאל, אל יחזקאל, אחרי זה גבר, אחרי זה איש, שתי העיניים כאבן תשיש, עם מלאכים הוא אכל ושתה, ובאלוהים כמו אני ואתה. אל יחזקאל, אל יחזקאל, אל יחזקאל, אל יחזקאל, איך הוא דיבר על מיני תועבות, איך הוא הרביץ נאומים על חוק, במילים ואיזה ביטויים, אף פעם צחק לו ורץ לבילויים. אל יחזקאל, אל יחזקאל, אל יחזקאל, אל יחזקאל, הוא הסלם שהוא טס על גלגל, בין עננים בוערים כחשמל, שני מלאכים הוא חיבק וליטף, הנביא יחזקאל ידיים וקיים. אל יחזקאל, אל יחזקאל, אל יחזקאל, אל יחזקאל, לילה אחד שעיניו עצומות, בא אל תקרה מלאה עצמות, עצם אל עצם דיבר ועשה, 1000 חתיכות אז הלכו אחריו, אל יחזקאל, אל יחזקאל, אל יחזקאל, אנו ואתה נביא יחזקאל, תלך אחריו אם תרמילו מקל, אל כל מקום שאותנו יביא, הנביא יחזקאל הוא בומבה של נביא, אל יחזקאל, אל יחזקאל, אל יחזקאל, אל יחזקאל,
Shabbat Shalom, everybody, and welcome to this week's World Alliance of Qara'im Torah study. I am Hakham Melech Ben Yaakov of the World Alliance of Qara'im. Let's stop this little thing here. There we go. We can hide that. We can bring this thing up here. Boom, that's that. Now we're looking all official. And we are going to be digging in, continuing with Deuteronomy. It's unbelievable, but we're actually closing in on the end of Deuteronomy. So rabbinical quote-unquote New Year is in about a week and a half or something like that. And most of the rabbinical communities in the world, and the Torah cycle, the 1 year Torah cycle, they end it on what's called Simchat Torah, which is basically the last day of Sukkot. So that means, well, if the first of the 7th month is in about a week and a half, then the end of Sukkot is 23 days later. It's on the 23rd of the 7th month. So in about a month, it's about 4 more weeks, and we are at the end of the current Torah cycle, which means then we go back to the beginning and we start all over again. And as I have said many times, I would like to add other Torah studies during the week. I'm still working on that. And I would like to maybe start having other people do Torah studies as well. If they have a topic that they want to talk about, I'm going to speak about that on the WhatsApp group. If you're not on the WhatsApp group, you should be. Marianne, if you want to join the WhatsApp group, just text me and I'll send you the link to the WhatsApp group. Ruben S. Scurry, I don't know if you guys are on the WhatsApp group, but we have a lot of vigorous discussions there. We try to keep everything very civil. We don't tolerate ad hominem attacks. We don't tolerate any kind of stuff like that. Sometimes things get a little bit heated. Sometimes things get a little bit out of control. Once in a blue moon, once in a blue moon, we do have to toss someone out of the group, but I really don't like to do that. I like to keep that to a minimum. I've been in too many groups over the years where if you say one thing that goes against the powers that be, then you're tossed right out. And I just really despise that. I like to give people, the room and the freedom to grow and to express themselves, and even if they start acting a bit like a jerk, which happens every once in a while, then I'll give them 1 warning, 2 warnings. I'll give them 10 warnings before we finally have to toss them out of the group. But it does happen once in a while. Anyway, I don't know why I got into that, but if you want to join the WhatsApp group, it's a great way to get into excellent Karaite discussions. So that's that. Marianne, regarding seeing each other soon, there is a possibility. In fact, I wanted to talk to you I wanted to get some advice regarding maybe visiting the United States. I'll talk to you separately about that. Obviously not now. The battery's about to go dead, so I better get the battery going. But let's worry about that in a couple of minutes. We're going to dig into the Torah study this week. And we are up to Deuteronomy 26. It's hard to believe that we're already up to Deuteronomy 26. But there we are. So let me set it up here for a second. So we've got to present differently here. Present, share screen, window, Twitter, and there we go. Okay, very good. So let me go over to my Torah screen. Again, I think I've solved the problem so you don't see the window in a window in a window in a window. Shabbat Shalom, Ariella and Ben. Shabbat Shalom. Welcome, Ariella. Hope you're feeling better. Ariella is has broken basically every extremity in her body. I know I shouldn't be making light of it, but sometimes you have to make light of it just to get through it. But we wish Ariella a speedy recovery, refuah shlema, Ariella, and I'm glad you're joining us for the Torah study. Okay, so yeah, I've got to plug in. So you know what? Let me do that right now so I don't get distracted afterwards. Excuse me for 1 second. Be right back. I guess I'll just put on literally one song while I'm getting this ready. So let me do that. Let me put on that first one that I liked. Okay. Screen. Share. Now I've got to go over here. No, Shoshi point. No. There we go.
And now, for Larry and the boys, would like to tell you the story of Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego.
Shadrach, Shadrach,
There were 3 children from the land of Israel.
Shadrach,
Meshach, Abednego, they took a trip to the land of Babylon.
Shadrach,
Meshach, Abednego, Nebuchadnezzar was the king of Babylon.
Shadrach,
Meshach, Abednego took a lot of gold and he made an idol.
Shadrach,
Meshach, Abednego. And he told everybody when they heard the music of the cornet. And he told everybody when they heard the music of the clarinet. And he told everybody when they heard the music of the horn. You must bow down and worship the idol Shadrach,
Meshach, Abednego,
but the children of Israel would not bow down, not Shadrach.
Meshach, Abednego,
You couldn't fool them with no golden idol Shadrach.
Meshach, Abednego.
The king put the children in the fiery furnace.
Oh, Shadrach,
Meshach, Abednego, heap on the coals and the red hot
oh,
brimstone.
Shadrach,
Meshach, Abednego, 7 times hotter, hotter than it ought to be.
Shadrach,
Meshach, Abednego, burned up the soldiers that the king had
Oh,
put there. Shadrach,
Shadrach,
Meshach, Abednego. But the Lord sent an angel with snowy white wings down in the middle of the furnace,
yeah,
talking to the children about the power of the gospel.
Shadrach, Meshach, Abednego,
Couldn't even harm a hair on the head of Shadrach.
Meshach, Abednego,
Okay.
Laughing and talking while the fires are chugging.
Shadrach,
All right, we'll continue that later. All plugged in. Okay, we'll do that later. Okay, so we are in Deuteronomy. We're going to get started now. And we are in Deuteronomy chapter 26, right at the beginning of chapter 26. So we only got to 21 last time. We're used to it already, but I'm going to speed right ahead to this week's Parsha, to chapter 26. Even though, again, we're missing some golden stuff here. What can I say? Fascinating stuff, but let's try to at least get back on track here. Oh, man, this is good stuff. Okay. All right, let's go. Deuteronomy 26. So we're going to be talking now about the first fruits and the tithes. This is very interesting stuff. And let's make sure it's working here. Shabbat Shalom, Tsuriel. Shabbat Shalom. Okay, so there we go. We should be good to go. All right, so let's see. We're starting in Deuteronomy chapter 26. We're in verse 1. Wihaya ki tavo el haaretz asher Yahweh Elohecha noten lecha nachala. What? I'm sorry. We yirishta we yeshavta ba. So when you shall come v'haya ki tavo, and there's the name of our parsha again, as we've said many times. The name of the parsha is usually the first significant or first different, not common word or phrase in the parsha, and there it is, ki tavo, and it means when you shall come. So when you come into the land. So so when it shall be that you come into the land which Yahweh your God gives to you, okay? And I think I've pointed this out a number of times recently. Ki tavo is literally when you will come into, but the future, or more specifically, the imperfect in biblical Hebrew expresses a lot of ideas, such as when you will come, or when you will, when you might, when you intend to, or sometimes it can be expressing of a desire or a prayer or a hope. All of it, not a prayer, that's the wrong word because it's more technical, but a desire or a hope. So in this case, I would translate it more like v'haya ki tavo, when you shall, on that eventual day that you shall come into the land, which is going to be pretty soon, because this is all taking place, as we said when we started the book of Deuteronomy, within about 2.5 months before Moshe dies. Joshua takes over, and the Israelites enter into the land of Israel. So when you shall come, let's do one very quickly here. On the day or at the time that you shall come into the land of Israel, that's maybe a good way to translate it, Asher Yahweh Elohecha noten lecha, which Yahweh your God gives you. We're always reminded that this is a special land that God gave us. He took us out of the house of bondage, Beit Avadim, the house of slaves, the slave pit, basically, and he's bringing us into our own land to be free, and or to be his slaves, maybe more specifically, which is better than being slaves to the Egyptians. We are now taken as his servants, as his slaves, and we're brought into a beautiful land, a land flowing with milk and honey. Nachala uyirishta uyeshavta ba, and you, which God gives to you as an inheritance, and you inherit it, or you take it over. You dispossess the inhabitants there. Uyeshavta ba, and you dwell in it. You set up your establishments in it. You set up your dwelling places in it. Ulakachta me reshit kol pri. Let me just highlight it up into right there. Ulakachta me reshit kol pri ha doma asher tavi me artzecha asher Yahweh Elohecha noten lach usamta ba batene. So when you come into the land, you shall take from among the first fruits, or among the first of all of the fruit of the land, fruit of the earth, asher tavime artzecha, which you shall bring out of, which you shall bring as produce, tivuah is produce, so which you shall produce off of your land, asher Yahweh Elohecha noten lach, which Yahweh your God gives to you. So again, even if we're reminded again that it's the land that God, the special land that God has given to us, with something but and you shall place it in a basket. Okay, mereshit. So this is the idea of the first fruits. We see here first fruits. Reshit. This is the same word as, of course, many of us already know that we see in Genesis 1. So in the beginning, God created the heavens and the earth. We're going to be reading those verses again in only just a couple of weeks. But the Hebrew is Bereshit. So in the beginning, or when God began to create. There are different ways to understand it. I actually go with the second one, but let's just go with the typical one, in the beginning. And here that's Bereshit, in the beginning. And here it's Lekachta Mereshit, same word, except the but is replaced with a mem. So when you take from the beginning, right? In the beginning, you take from the beginning, or of the fruit of the land. So this is speaking about what's usually called the first fruits. In other words, when we harvest, when we take things from the land, we give God the first portion. Just as the firstborn belongs to God, we have to redeem the firstborn. So the first fruits belong to God. We give God the best, and we give God the first. It's kind of like, well, that's kind of not a good example, but let's say when you pay your taxes to the IRS, right? You give them your money, and then you keep the rest. That's a really horrible example, but maybe something more along the lines of, I don't know. I don't know. I can't think of anything offhand. But you give the first and you give the best to God. Okay? And giving to God doesn't mean giving to God. God doesn't eat fruit. So ultimately that is put to use, and that is usually done by it coming into the hands of the Kohanim and the Levites. Okay, so you place it in a tene. A tene is a basket. And I don't think this word appears very often. 26:2, 26:4, 28. So only in Deuteronomy, it only has 4 occurrences in the entire Tanakh. And it's very interesting because we will get probably to 28, Deuteronomy 28 today, and that's the blessing and the curse. And that's the only other place that this word tene appears. So first we're told, in Deuteronomy 26, we're told to take these first fruits and put them in the tene and the basket. And later on, with the blessing and the curse, we're going to find out that your basket will be blessed or your basket will be cursed if you keep or do not keep the laws of the Torah. And those are the only 4 places that this noun appears, which is very interesting. From an unused word, a basket. Let's see what else we can learn here. Basket. Tani, tene. Yeah, that's it. From an unused root, probably meaning to weave, a basket of interlaced osiers, a basket. Okay, so you shall place it in a basket. Let's check right here that everything's working. Cool. Yor, Shabbat Shalom, Shabbat Shalom. והלכת אל המקום אשר יבחר יהוה אלוהיך לשכן שמו שם. And you shall go to the place which Yahweh, your God, shall choose to make his name dwell there. Well, we've seen this phrase now a bunch of times. For instance, we saw it last week in Deuteronomy 17:9. Let's just pick that up for a second. So remember, we were speaking about this verse that is very important to the Karaites, because the Rabbinites use it as a polemic against the Karaites because of these words here, that the judge that will be in that day. And the rabbis say that they conveniently say that they are the judges in the day, and therefore that they are the ones being spoken about in this verse, and therefore they have the ultimate power over the nation. But remember, what it's really speaking about is setting up a court hierarchy. There's lower courts, local courts, and then if you can't solve the problem, if the problem is too difficult to be solved in the lower courts, the courts in your gates, then where is it? Then you shall go, kamta ve'alita el makom asher yichad Yahweh Elohecha bo. Then you shall arise and go up to the place which Yahweh, your God, shall choose. Okay, but actually we saw after that, I'm trying to think where it was. We saw that almost exactly word for word the place that God will choose. I just can't remember where it is, so we won't search it down now. But this phrase we've seen before, almost word for word, and it always means the same thing. It always means specifically that central place of worship, right? One God, one place of worship. Eventually, that would be revealed by Yahweh through a series of incidents that he has chosen the place of Jerusalem, of the Temple Mount, of Mount Moriah, Mount Moriah, right above the city of David. But before then, it's wherever the tabernacle happens to be, whether it's in Gilgal, whether it's in Shiloh. It moved around, and eventually a permanent house was built in Jerusalem by Solomon, originally suggested by David and then built by Solomon. So that's what it's referring about. And that is wherever it is, wherever that tabernacle is, whether it's temporary, a tent, or whether it's permanent, a house, then that is the place. That's the central place of worship, the only place of worship that we are meant to cultically, officially worship Yahweh. And in fact, I was researching a little bit this week the synagogue system. So the synagogue system, the earliest synagogues were not found until, I can't remember the date offhand, but well into the rabbinical period. And we spoke about this. Yeah, we did speak about it a bit last week, about how the rabbis, they tried to move the locus, the focus of Yahweh worship away from this one place, which is laid down, which is prescribed by the Torah, prescribed by the Torah, and they tried to diffuse worship into many places, and they came up with a synagogue system, which would eventually replace this one place, and then they would cry crocodile tears over the destruction of the second temple. They weren't around, thank God, in the first temple, but they would cry crocodile tears over the destruction of the second temple. But it's my opinion that they already had it in their mind to destroy the second temple and to replace it with the synagogue system, this decentralized, multi-faceted, multi places, many places of worship, just like the idol worshippers had. Idol worshippers had as many gods as they had tall hills and under leafy trees, as the Tanakh says a bunch of times. So the fact that the Pharisees / rabbis moved away from the central place of worship, which is a huge part of the Torah, the central place of worship, to this diffused, this multiple places of worship, the synagogue system, says to me that they were trying to essentially destroy the power structure that is laid out in the Torah. They were trying to usurp the leadership and the leadership structure of the nation of Israel away from the Kohanim and the Levites, who are in charge of the temple, and also away from the prophets, the judges, and anyone else who is put in charge of the nation of Israel by the Torah itself, and to replace all of the system with their own system, with themselves, basically change the Torah while they were at it, and the rest is history. It's been a disaster ever since. Okay, so that's that rant for today. So, and I had a friend who recently died just about a year ago, Ruvain Prager. Maybe some of you know him. He was an amazing guy, and very interesting fella, and just a super nice guy as well. And he had a number of things going. So, but one of his main things was Beged Ivri. You might know him through Beged Ivri, where he made his version, or his vision, I should say, of Tanakhic clothing, and he also called himself a Levite in service. He was a Levite. I don't think he was a Cohen. He was a Levite, and he was very aware of this idea that even though he was rabbinical, without a doubt, he would often quote the Mishnah and the Talmud, but he was very aware of the idea that power had been taken away, the properly ordained power given by the Torah to the Kohanim and to the Levites and to other groups such as the House of David, the prophets, the judges, which a judge in the book of Judges is always a prophet, or almost always a prophet, so that the power had been taken away from these rightfully ordained leaders of the nation of Israel and been stolen by the Pharisees, by the rabbis, and and switched over into their hands as they usurped the power of the nation of Israel, instituted their own distorted version of Torah, just as Yerovam ben Nevat did by building the two golden calves, one in Bethel and the other in Dan. And so the rabbis are, in a sense, the continuation of Yerovam ben Nevat. They usurped the power of the nation away from the rightful leaders, the rightful owners of that power ordained by the Torah of the nation of Israel. So, at any rate, and whenever we see this verse here, or this type of verse, it always means it's referring to that one place that was diffused and eventually destroyed by the rabbis, and then allowed them to cry their fake crocodile tear for its destruction. Okay, so that ran. So what do you do there? So you ubata Elohen asher yeh b'yamim hahem, and it's very interesting as well. This is actually very interesting. You come to the Kohen who shall be in Deuteronomy 17. Okay, bata el kohanim alivi el ela asher b'yamim hahem. It's exactly the same phrase. You shall go to the Kohanim and to the Levites who will be there in those days. And again, they use this, who shall be in those days, as a polemic to say that means that they have power because they are the judges in the day. Well, after they stole the power of the nation of Israel, and what I always, when rabbis, when modern day Pharisees / rabbinites bring up these four words here in Deuteronomy 17:9, I say, okay, well, if all it takes is that you usurp the power of the nation, but that day, I guess they kind of were. Then mean that if I were the right army, and we were to usurp the power, we were to make our presence on the Temple Mount, and then you would have to follow us as judges. That usually shuts them up right away, and they start going no, the real blah blah blah. Okay, so but we see here the same phrase. When your it shall be in those days. It's exactly the same phrase here. The same that the rabbinites use as a polemic against the Karaites to say, well, in that day, rabbis. Well, here the same phrase occurs here. You shall go to the Kohen who shall be in those days. Kohen asher yeh b'yamim hahem, and in Deuteronomy 17:9, Kohanim halewiim ve'el hashofet asher yeh b'yamim. The same four words. Asher b'yamim hahem. Here, just highlight them. Asher yeh b'yamim hahem. So if that's the case, then I guess that this phrase also is referring now, to well, it doesn't matter who it is, whoever's in that day. What day? That's who you go to, even if it's a corrupt Kohen, even if later they were Kohanim or they were high priests that basically either bought the position or had bought the position of the seed of Aaron. They were not even descendants of Aaron. So it's interesting, and I think I want to add this to my verses here, so I remember. Let's see. This could be kind of like secondary. 3. Let me just copy it and paste it. And this is going to be Deuteronomy 17:9. Let's put here, let's see, Deuteronomy 23. Do this. I'll bring this in a little bit and make this a bit bigger. Zoom 25. Okay, so oops. Oh, darn it. start messing with this. Okay, so C, Deuteronomy, and this is 26:3. Deuteronomy 26:3. Deuteronomy 26:3. This column a bit bigger. Whoa. Let's try it again. C, Deuteronomy 26:3, where the phrase here المקום אשר יבחן אל הכהן אשר יהיה בימים ההם, where the phrase is used, speaking about the basket of first. Okay, that's good enough note for now. Cool. Let me expand this out a little bit. Like so. Good enough. Okay, there we go. Shoshi boy, not now, sweetheart. Okay, so let's go back here. So with Amarta Elau, so you're going to go to the Kohen who shall be in those, speaking about the rabbis, hopefully. Amarta Elau, with Amarta Elau, and you shall say to him. And now we have another phrase. He gathati hayom liyahweh Elohecha, ki bati el haaretz asher nishba Yahweh la'avotenu latet lanu. Just one second here. Ela wehigati hayom liyahweh Elohecha, ki bati el haaretz asher nishba Yahweh la'avotenu latet lanu. I just want to see how they do with that in translation for a second. I have my own way of translating it, but I want to see one thing. So it's Deuteronomy 26, English, and that's 26:3. Right. Good. They put it in double quotes. Okay. So one of the things here that we notice is that this is a phrase that you're supposed to say word for word. Okay, you say to the Kohen, you come to the Kohen and you say, Higadati Hayom liyahweh Elohecha, Kibati el haaretz asher nishba Yahweh la'avotenu latet lanu. I declare today to Yahweh, your God, speaking to the Kohen, that I've come into the land, or I've come to the land which Yahweh swore to our fathers to give to us. So I want to add this phrase here too. I have in the spreadsheet also a list of, if I can find it here. Let's see. Scripts. So these are specific things that we're supposed to say. Word for word. There are not too many of them, but throughout the Torah, we will find times where the Torah tells us to say specific words, or at least it seems as if it's telling us to say specific words. In other words, word for word, almost like a prayer that we're supposed to say, or a phrase that we're supposed to say. And this is one of them. So let me copy this. So you're supposed to go to the Kohen, and you're supposed to say, this is Deuteronomy 26:3. Deuteronomy 26:3, and the phrase is this. Shoshi boy, not now, sweetheart. The cat is crawling all over me. Okay, and this is the first of two phrases or two scripted phrases related to the first fruits basket. So you're actually supposed to say this word for word, it seems. Okay. I declare today to Yahweh, your God, that I've come into the land which Yahweh has sworn to our fathers to give to us. Verse 4. We lakach hakohen hatene mi yodecha wa hi niho lifnei mizbach Yahweh Elohecha. And then the Kohen shall take the basket from your hands, and he shall place it before the altar of Yahweh your God. The altar, if it's not qualified here, there are actually two altars in the tabernacle complex. One is the altar of sacrifices, and the other is inside the holy area, and that would be the incense altar. Well, this is clearly speaking about the altar of sacrifices because regular Israelites, are not allowed into the holy area where the incense altar is. So this is speaking about the sacrificial altar. Again, if we were to bring up a map of the tabernacle. Oh, this map. Okay, fine. Oh, it's a video. No, I don't want to follow. Okay. Let's go to images. And yeah, good enough. I guess that's an image after all. So if you could see here, how do I make this bigger? Share, save. I don't know how to make it bigger. Right here is the altar of sacrifices. Okay, sacrificial altar. This is the Ohel Moed, the tent of meeting, the actual tent. Here we have the menorah. Here we have the showbread altar when you walk in on the right, and in front of the parochet, the curtain that separates between the holy area and the holy of holy areas where the Ark of the Covenant is. Then we have here the incense altar, and only the Kohen Gadol is allowed into this area, the holy area. So if it speaks about the placing the basket before the altar, it could only mean this altar right here, because that's where the whole thing would have taken place, because regular Israelites cannot enter into the tent of meeting. Okay. So choppy video and sound. Oh, okay. How about now? Is it any better? This problem is all going to be solved hopefully by next week. First of all, can we do a sound check? No, the rabbis are too stupid to hack into my signal because they're too busy determining, exactly what the right way to shecht an animal is and what blessing they have to say on a banana. So they don't have time to hack into my signal. Okay, so but let's do a quick sound check. Is it any better now? Anybody? Can I get a sound check, please? Hello? Okay. By next week, hopefully this problem is all going to be solved because, as I may have mentioned in previous weeks, we ordered, finally, we live in a small village in the middle of nowhere, and internet has always been a problem here. It's a little bit better now. I've hooked up a couple of different hacks to make it better. But by next week, what I finally did is I ordered Starlink. If you know what that is, Elon Musk's product where you get high-speed internet off the satellites that are in low Earth orbit. So the package already arrived. I just have to set it up. And hopefully by next week, I'm gonna have super, super high-speed internet. So this hopefully is the last week that this problem is going to happen. Hopefully, if we can get everything set up and everything works as expected, then next week the internet is going to be super high speed, and this problem will not happen again. Okay. So Mizbach Yahweh Elohecha. So the Kohen places the basket in front of the Mizbeach, in front of the altar. We Anita Marta, and then you shall respond or answer, and you shall say Lifnei Yahweh Elohecha, and you shall answer and say before Yahweh your God. So now you make this declaration, and this is again another scripted. This is another scripted segment. So it goes into, let's see, up until here. Up to here. This entire phrase is scripted word for word. So let's look at it, and then maybe we'll try to get some commentary on it. So Arami Oved Avi. So there are two general ways to translate this. One is that my father was a wandering Aramaean, and the other one is that an Aramaean tried to destroy my father. So let's talk about, well, let's translate first and we can go back and talk about it. So we'll go with the more common one, which is that my father was a wandering Aramaean. Uyared Mitzrayma, and he went down to Egypt. Uyager Sham, Yagar Sham, Bi Mitei Mi'at, and he dwelled there, few number. Wayisham Leroy Gadol Asum Wa Rav, and he became there a huge nation, or big nation, great in size and extensive. These are all basically synonyms. Gadol, Atzum, Rav. Basically, as we've said many times, when you have repetition, even if it's not, sometimes it's the same word in slightly different forms, but sometimes they're synonyms, or as I used to say when I was a kid, synonyms. Sometimes they're synonyms. And if they are, it's still, the purpose is to still emphasize. It's emphasis. So this would be something like if I were saying in English, and he became there, my father became there in Egypt, a big, great, and enormous nation. Maybe that would be a good translation. Okay. Wow. Yar'u otanu hamisrim we ya nunu. And I'll read to the end of the verse. Wa'itnu alenu avodah kasha. So the Egyptians, so it became a great and powerful nation down in Egypt, but the Egyptians did evil to us. Wa'anunu, and they oppressed us, or how do they usually translate us? Translate Ya'anunu is usually a more common one. Wait a second. Afflicted us. We knew alenu avodah kasha, and they placed upon us heavy work, hard work. Verse 7. Nitzak el Yahweh Elohei avotenu, and we cried out to Yahweh, the God of our fathers. Wa'ishma Yahweh et kolenu, and Yahweh heard our voice. Yar et anyenu, and he took cognizance of our suffering. Wa'et amalenu, and our hard work. Wa'et lahatzenu, and the pressure we were under. Verse 8. So this is all part of this phrase that you say when you bring the first fruits. Wa yosienu Yahweh mi Misraim, and Yahweh took us out of Egypt bi yad zakah ubizro'ah nituyah, with a strong hand and an outstretched arm, u bi morah gadol, and with great visions, great sights. In other words, great things to behold with the eyes. Ubi otot umuftim, and with signs, and with, they usually translate muftim as wonders, things that stick out, things that are amazing. So wonders. Verse 9. Wayavi'enu el hamakom hazeh, and he brought us to this place. Wa'iten lanu et haaretz hazot eretz zavat halav u'divash, and he gave us this. And he gave us this land, Eretz Zavat Halav Udvash, a land flowing with milk and honey. And you've all heard that phrase. Eretz Zavat Halav Udvash. In fact, when in the incident of the spies, the Israelites mocked this phrase by complaining to Moses that he had taken them out of a land flowing with milk and honey, speaking about Egypt. and basically mocking God and mocking Moses for bringing them out into the desert. They were not yet in the land, obviously. The land flowed, Hebrew, that's Eretz Zavat Halav Udvash. The word Eretz in Hebrew means a land. It's, in my strong opinion, related to the English word earth. And you can actually trace it back through many different languages. So, for instance, maybe the most direct route would be that earth can be traced back to the German Ard. I believe I'm saying that correctly. Erde, maybe it is, but earth in German is Erde. And then you could trace it back to, I'm not sure what it is in the Greek, but in Aramaic, it's Ard or Ara. No, I'm sorry. In the German, it's Erd. And then in the Aramaic, it's Ara. And then that goes back to Eretz or Aretz. So you can really trace it straight through from the Hebrew up to the English word earth. So Eretz is earth. Eretz, earth. You can even hear the similarity. Here it's Aleph, Resh, Asadi. Aleph is equivalent to the EA. Resh is equivalent to the R. And Asadi, Sa sound, is equivalent to the Th. It's a very common transition. You'll see this in a lot of languages that a Sa sound, an S sound can transmorph into a Th or a Th sound. You see that very common in from Aramaic to from Hebrew to Aramaic, for instance. So, for instance, the Hebrew word for an ox is shor, and the Aramaic word is tor. Sh becomes th, shor, tor. And by the way, that's where we get the English word. Well, it's not really an English word, but the word Taurus, right? The astrological sign Taurus, the bull. It can be traced back, and even the etymologies admit that Taurus can be traced back to the Hebrew word shor. That's very rare. They usually like to take it off track onto this path of this Proto-Indo-European nonsense and ignore the obvious Semitic roots of many words. But Eretz can be traced back to earth, and in fact, you can see it in the Romance languages. So for instance, in Spanish, earth or land is tierra. In Portuguese, it's terra. In Latin, it's terra, T-E-R-R-A. So it's the same letters, except it undergoes what's called metathesis. Metathesis is a very common phenomenon in linguistic development or in evolution of languages, where consonants will switch places with each other. So maybe a very common example would be pugular instead of nuclear, or people saying X instead of ask, right? That's metathesis. The word is ask, but it's easier, maybe more easily than ask, right? It flows more easily. So it's like an easier way to say it, and that counts for the development a lot of times of languages. So that's metathesis, and you see it in very common when you go from Semitic languages to Latin to the Romance languages. You'll see a lot of metathesis. I can bring a number of examples if it's interesting to people. Maybe I'll bring one other example. So at any rate, it's Levitan. Mr. Levitit is a specialist at the Covenant of the House of Aaron. Yeah, I know, Maria. I didn't want to go there, but let's. I couldn't think of a better example in English. So, okay. If you're interested, I know of doctoral thesis, Bo David Levitan, who is Cohen, entitled is "How the Rabbis Overthrew." Oh yes, please send that to me. Oh my God, yes. Turiel, please send me the link. This is the kind of thing I absolutely love to. I will devour that. I'll be all over that one. Okay, so yes, so the Latin terra, T-E-R-R-A, you see the same words as earth. Earth is basically an a sound, r sound, and a t sound. A, t, or r, th, right? Earth. If you switch, if you go backwards and you make it, instead of A-R-T, you make it T-R-A. So A-R-T would be like earth, and T-R-A is terra. And so that's the metathesis right there. In the Latin languages, once again, it's very, very common to see metathesis. I'll bring another example, which is the Hebrew nirdam. And I'm trying to think where it would appear in the Tanakh. I think actually, let's see if I can find it. If I'm not mistaken, it's going to be in Genesis 3. Let's see here. Just give me a second. Tardema, yeah. It should be in Genesis 3. I believe that's the word that's used there. Not Genesis 3, Genesis 2. One second. Here it is. Tardema. Okay, so this is Genesis chapter 2, verse 21. This is the creation of Eve from the tzelah, usually translated and understood as the rib of Adam. And it says here in Genesis 2:21, which we'll be reading in about 4 or 5 weeks, Vayapel Yahweh Elohim tardema al ha'adam, and God brought down a sleep. Basically, God put Adam to sleep, ala Adam, upon Adam. He brought down a slumber upon Adam. Basically, he put Adam to sleep. Wa ishan, and he went to sleep, or he brought down a drowsiness, one could say, and he went to sleep. And he took one of his ribs, and he closed up the flesh over it, meaning Adam's flesh. Basically, he performed surgery on Adam, and then we know the rest. He built Eve, according to the creation story here, from that rib. But the thing I want to point out here is this word for Yapel Yahweh Elohim tardema al Adam. Yahweh caused Adam to fall into a deep slumber. The word here is tardema, tardema. And the root, we know that all Hebrew words have usually a 3-letter root. Sometimes it's a 2-letter root. In rare cases, sometimes it's a 4-letter root. But usually that's a repetition of a 2-letter root, like lidarder or something like this. But usually, generally, it's a 3-letter root, and we have to pick out the 3-letter root here, and we can see it in the middle of the word. It's going to be, I don't think I can get that one word here. I don't think I can get it, but let's see if I can point it out. It doesn't matter. It's the 2nd, 3rd, and 4th letter, and resh daled mem, or if we were to translate into English, it's RDM. So radam would be the underlying root, radam. Okay, so radam means to fall asleep, to go to sleep. And where can anyone think of the word in the Latin languages, in the Romance languages? And by the way, Romance doesn't mean like you're giving flowers to your girlfriend. Romance means Roman. That's where the word Romance language comes from. It means the languages that are based on what the Romans speak. So in the Roman-derived languages, which are basically in southern and southwestern Europe, central, southwestern, not even central, but southwestern Europe. These are the Romance languages for the most part. There are some exceptions. Romanian is a Romance language, even though it's in Eastern Europe, for instance. But so can anyone find the equivalent in the Romance languages of this root RDM, taking into account, in other words, radam, taking into account that it means to fall asleep, to go to sleep, and taking into account that we often see this phenomenon of metathesis, whereby consonants will switch letters. Anybody want to render a guess? I gave Adam a roofie. Anybody? Well, if we take RDM, Resh Daled Mem, okay, is in the Hebrew to sleep, in Hebrew root. And we switch around the first 2 consonants, then we get DRM, which is the root for sleep in Latin. So for instance, okay, so sleep in Latin is dormire. Dormire is to sleep in Latin. In Spanish, it's dormir. In Portuguese, it's dormir. I don't know what it is in French. Let's see, it's dormez-vous, dormez-vous, I guess dormez or something like this, dormez. And we even have words in English that have made their way down from the Romance languages. Usually when we find Romance language roots in English, they come from French because of the Norman invasion of the British Isles in 1077. I don't know. I have to ask a Brit. They know all this crap that I never remember. So, but usually it comes through the French. So we have English words such as dormitory, dormant. What else? Those are the two I can think of offhand. But you can trace dormitory and dormant right back to the French dorme, I'm guessing it is, back to the Latin dormire, and then ultimately reversing the metathesis that occurred, you can trace it back to the Hebrew RDM, radam, which we see already back in Genesis chapter 2, verse 21. Okay, so keep an eye out for that. It's really fascinating stuff. I would also like to point out or highlight the work of a very, very interesting person who he's created. He calls his theory Edenics. And I think he goes a bit overboard. He will speculate often without proving it through the etymologies. He'll just say, oh, well, this sounds kind of like the Hebrew word such and such, so therefore it's as good a guess as what the standard etymology says. But nonetheless, despite the fact that I think he goes overboard sometimes, he's amazing. I mean, he really does bring out a lot of very, very interesting connections between the words in modern or even some ancient languages and tracing those words straight back to Hebrew. So he calls his theory Edenics. His name is, gosh, what's his name again? It's right on the tip of my tongue. I'm friends with him on Facebook. Let me see if I can find him. But if you look up Edenics, you'll find it. But just give me 1 second here. Let me see if I can find his name again. Just 1 second. Definitely worth looking up. Second. One second. 1 second. You should be in my feed. Not too far down. Oh, God, what's his name again? Let's give it a second. I can't find it. A second. I'll give up. A little bit more. I can do it this way. Let me just look up Edenics. Look it up right here. Hold on a second. Edenics. Isaac Mosenson. That's his name. So check him out. Interesting fella. And his whole thing is showing that the roots of many modern and some ancient languages can be traced back to ancient Hebrew roots. Okay, so let's move on. That being said, let's unravel. And what was that comment just now? Ebonics? No, definitely not Ebonics. That can be traced. Well, I'm not going there. Okay, I'm trying to keep it sterile. Okay. So a land flowing with milk and honey. We were at this rehearsed phrase or the scripted phrase that when you come into the land of Israel, each person must take his basket, must bring the first fruits of his produce and bring it to the Kohen and say the scripted phrase. So where were we? Verse 9. A land flowing with milk and honey. Verse 10. We ata hine heveti et reshit pri ha-adama asher natata li Yahweh. So, and now behold, I have brought the first fruits of the land which you have given to me, Yahweh. And that's the end of it right there. This is where it ends. Okay, so the scripted phrase goes from here to here. Arami Oved Avi until here. This is a scripted phrase. Okay? So it's about, what do we have? 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, about 6 verses worth of scripted phrases. And then, after you're done scripting the phrase, and you shall place it, or you shall lay it down before Yahweh your God, meaning lay the basket down before Yahweh your God. And you shall prostrate yourself. Prostrate means basically kowtow, kind of. You put your face to the ground, basically bow down before Yahweh your God. Verse 11, V'samachta b'chol hatov asher natan lecha Yahweh Elohecha ulevetecha ata v'halewi v'hager asher b'kirbecha. And you shall rejoice for all of the goodness which Yahweh your God has given you and your household, and the Levite and the ger, the sojourner or the convert that lives among you, that lives in your midst. So this is a happy occasion. You're thanking God. You're thanking God for bringing you into the land, for giving you this wonderful land full of milk and honey. So the question I've always had about these verses, well, first of all, let me add the verses to the list. So we're going from here to here. I'll just put this phrase here. So this is going to be Deuteronomy 26, 5 through 10. 5 through 10. So Deuteronomy 26, 5 through 10. Do I already have this? No, I don't. So Deuteronomy 26, 5 through 10. And this is the second of 2 scripted phrases related to the first fruits basket. And it goes on, but that's enough. Just put triple dots there so we can. Okay, so that's that. Make this a bit bigger. Okie dokie. Yes, Suriel, please post a link. I would love to read that. Okay, so that's that. So we have a cross-reference here to Leviticus 27. Let's just look at that very quickly. Leviticus 27:30. Just see what it's referring to there. No, so this is talking about the tithes. Okay. I guess it's referring back to that over there. Deuteronomy 14. Let me just check that out for a second. It's Deuteronomy 14:22. Okay, that's also tithes. So there's a couple of questions here, or the main question I've always had here is, does this mean this has to be done every year? Or does this mean that you do it once, this first fruits basket, when you enter the land of Israel? So let's explore that a little bit, because the rabbis say that this is done on Shavuot. And I'm trying to remember their proof for that. Well, let's look at a little bit of commentary here. So we're in Deuteronomy 26. Mm-mm. Leviticus, Deuteronomy 26, 1531. Shit, to bed we go. So let's see what commentary, see what Robert Alter may have to say about this. Again, some people think I'm like some kind of Robert Alter fanboy or something like that. I'm definitely not. I think he's a good starting point. He kind of summarizes things, and I often agree with what he says, but I don't take his words always as the word of God, and there are some times that I disagree with him. But is an excellent starting point for looking at commentary. Okay, so from the first one, neither the amount to be taken nor the kinds of produce are specified. The early rabbis understood this to refer to 7 kinds of agricultural produce, Shivat Aminim, for which the land of Israel was famous. So we won't go there. I've told today, so told Igid has the obvious sense of making a formal declaration. In keeping with the textualization of biblical culture that is one of the central innovations of Deuteronomy, these verses and the next group of verses in this chapter offer an actual liturgy, the first full-fledged liturgy in the Torah to be recited by each Israelite farmer. So that's what we're saying. He calls it a liturgy, which I guess is the technical word for it, but we're saying scripted. This is something that is actually scripted in the Torah. You have to say this. The Israelite farmer is supposed to say this word for word, but it's not the first one, quite frankly. We saw others. So in Genesis 48:20, we're given the blessing that Israel should say in the future when they bless their children, and that is Simcha Elohim Ephraim Menashe. May God make you like Ephraim and Menashe. We had the example in Deuteronomy 21:7 that we read about last week. We learned about last week that when a dead body is found in a field between 2 cities, then the elders come to the dead body, and the elders of the nearest city have to recite this phrase over here: Yadenu lo shafchu et adam hazeh. Our hands did not spill this blood, and it goes on. So I disagree with Robert Alter. It's not the first full-fledged liturgy in the Torah. Well, maybe full-fledged. Maybe since he's added the proviso that's full-fledged, maybe so. But there are other smaller ones. Okay. So Arami Oved Avi, which again is usually understood as a wandering Aramean, was my father, or an Aramean tried to destroy my father. So Robert Alter goes with the first, the more common understanding. He doesn't translate it as a wandering Aramee. He translates it as an Aramee about to perish. So that's an interesting translation. So the two most likely candidates for the Aramean are Abraham, who came from Mesopotamia, and Jacob, who spent 20 years there after fleeing from Esau. And I think there was some discussion on the WhatsApp group, the World Alliance of Qara'im WhatsApp group, yesterday and today regarding the meaning of this. I think Ariella was speaking about this. So it's indeterminate. It's not really 100% clear. So first of all, it's not clear whether it means an Aramean tried to destroy my father. I don't think that's what it means. I think grammatically we can show that is not what it means, and I can go back and do that in a second. So that leaves the other usual translation was my father was a wandering Aramean, or I think a much better translation actually is Robert Alter's here. My father was an Aramean about to perish. That's a very good and interesting translation because it picks up on the Hebrew word oved. Arami oved avi, oved aleph vet vav dalid means, the underlying root means to be destroyed or to perish. So oved is the present tense, and so means is perishing or is about to perish. It's a good translation. So, and then the question becomes, if it is speaking about my father was a Aramean about to perish, is it speaking about Abraham? or is it speaking about Jacob? And I think this is also indeterminate, but I will give my opinion in just a little while. But Abraham, because he lived, his father Terach took him from. They left Ur Kasdim. They left Ur of the Chaldees, which was the major actually Sumerian city at the time, Sumer, Sumerian, not to be confused with Samaritan, Sumerian city at the time, and they went to Haran, which was in the territory of Padan Aram, which was in Aram Naharaim, which is Aram Naharaim means Aram of the two rivers, because it was the Aramean kingdom was between the two great rivers, between the Euphrates and the Tigris, the Prat and the Hiddekel. So it could refer to Abraham, since it was when Abraham was in Haran, was in Aram, was in Aramean territory, that he got the call from God to come to Israel. The first time that Yahweh speaks to any of the patriarchs is when he says to Abraham, Lech lecha, go to the land I will show you. So that's one candidate, and the other candidate is Jacob. And that, again, as Robert Alter points out here, is because Jacob fled Esau. Esau wanted to kill Jacob after he thought he perceived Jacob as having stolen his birthright. In fact, Jacob bought it fair and square, but Esau, being the petulant, violent child that he was, wanted to kill Jacob after accusing him of stealing the birthright. And so Jacob fled to Uncle Laban, who was his mother's brother, and that was back in Aramean territory, back in Haran, and he lived there for a total of 20 years. Okay, so it could be either one. Let's read on here. The surprising use of Aramean is an epithet for patriarch. As an epithet for patriarch may reflect the antiquity of this recited formula, since the Arameans later chiefly figured as enemies, right? So the Arameans were the enemies of the Israelites in the times of the Tanakh. The precise meaning of the verb oved has long been in dispute. And again, we're talking about Arami Oved Avi. My father was an Aramean, a wandering Aramean, or Aramean about to perish, as Robert Alter translates it. That's Oved. Some understand it to mean wandering, though when it is used elsewhere in that sense, the meaning appears to be closer to lost, which would not fit here. Because the end of the sentence registers going down into Egypt implicitly in a time of famine, which both Abraham and Jacob did, it is likely that the intended reference is to the patriarchs being on the point of perishing. Thus, the prosperous farmer, even as he brings to the sanctuary specimens of the first yield of his crop, recalls how his forefathers were close to dying from famine and were obliged to go down to Egypt, where in due course they were enslaved. Okay, that's a nice take on it. As Jeffrey H. Tigai notes, the liturgy shifts the grounds of the ritual of first fruits from the agricultural cycle to a rehearsal of history. Some scholars have gone a step further in conjecturing that this emphasis on the God of history is, in the presentation of first fruits, is an implied polemic against pagan agricultural rites, okay, in which the deities were invoked. Get back here. Where's my scroll bar? The deity were invoked strictly in regard to their function in guaranteeing the fertility of the crops. Okay, so a lot to consider there. We're not going to go that much into it. So Arami, where was it? Where are we? Arami Oved Avi וירד מצרים יגר שם במתי מספר ויהי שם לגוי גדול ועצום רעב. It's really kind of indeterminate. I like to think really that it's speaking about Jacob. That makes more sense to me, and the reason is because it says that he went down to Egypt and turned into with few in number, and then turned into a great, large, and enormous nation. So here, if I read this, the highlighted part here, Arami Oved Avi, my father was a wandering Aramaean. We Yared Mitzrayma, and he went down to Egypt. We Yagar Sham b'Metei Mispar, and he dwelled there, few in number. Vayisham Lagoy Gadol Atzum V'Rav, and he became there a huge, enormous, and great nation. So that seems to be speaking about Jacob. But then again, the fact that Jacob is called an Aramaean doesn't necessarily mean it's because he lived in the territory of Aram, in the Aramaean territory with Lavan for 20 years. It could be because his grandfather, Abraham, was an Aramaean. And then in that case, the Arami Oved Avi was actually referring to Abraham. So it could go either way. I think it's referring to Jacob, but he's being called, so I take an intermediate stance on it. I think it's referring to Jacob, but he's being called an Aramaean, not because he was with Uncle Levi in Aramaean territory in Aram for 20 years, but because his grandfather Abraham was called to Israel from Haran, from Aramaean territory. So it's kind of a hybrid answer. I think it's referring to Jacob, but Jacob is called an Aramaean because his grandfather was an Aramaean when he was called to Israel. Okay, that's my take on it. All right, any questions, any comments? What nationality was Malki Tzedek? All I know is Shabbat Shalom, yet here in EU. Shabbat Shalom. Christian, where in the EU are you? Out of curiosity. All I know is Spiritus College is on Michigan Avenue. Unfortunately, I don't. I'll have to get it in touch with you. The college by snail mail. Okay. Huh. Let's see. Let me try to do a Google on it. So what is the name of it? Title is How the Rabbis... Okay. Let's grab this. David Levitan. How the Rabbis Overthrew. Let me see if I can Google it. David Levitan. David Levitan. David Levitan. How the Rabbis Overthrew. Yeah, I don't see anything. Let's just do a search on David Levitan. David Levitan, born September, is an American young adult fiction author. I don't think that's him. That's a different David Levitan, obviously. An entertainer that specializes in mentalism. A strategic company builder who leverages broad technical competence with strong business acumen to drive growth and profitability with public and private, blah, 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 blah. An editorial director at Scholastic and the founding editor of Push Imprint. A freelance journalist based in Philadelphia who writes about energy, the environment, and health. President and COO of Waterleaf International. This guy does a lot. He's everything. A board-certified gastroenterologist offering Dallas-Fort Worth area patients experienced gastrointestinal treatment. Okay. Huh. That's it. Okay, let's try to narrow down the search a little bit more. So I'm not seeing Doc. Wait a second. Surreal, what did you say up above? Specialist of the Covenant, Mr. Levy. It's Levitan, okay? Okay, I don't know. An AAA plus. Wow. Okay. Download from Spiritus Judaica College. Spiritus Judaica College. All right, let's do a search on that. And then I'll give up if this doesn't work. Spiritus. David Levitan, Hebrew University of Jerusalem. biochemistry, obituaries, David Duty. Show results with Spiritus. Spiritus New Generation, the Sentinel. Spiritus Institute. Let's do this. I don't know. I give up. Chicago Jewish History. All right, I give up. Okay, well, if you can get it, Suriel, somehow or another, that would be amazing. Okay, so right. So getting back to our verses. So verse 10, you shall lay it down before Yahweh your God. This appears to contradict verse 4, in which, with the same verb used, the priest is the one who lays down the basket. Whoa, thunder. The explanation of the Mishnah that both the priest and layman laid down the basket at different points in the ceremony may well reflect the actual biblical procedure. With the basket still on his shoulder, he recites from, I have told today the Lord. Okay, that's a bit technical. I don't want to go down that route. I've rooted out what is to be sanctified. Okay, so that's already the end of it. All right. Okay, so but what he is pointing out is that it twice says laid down the basket. And so it says it here. You find it? So here in verse 4 it says, that the Kohen takes the basket from your hands and he lays it down before the altar of Yahweh your God. And then it says over here, one second, please. And then it says over here, where is it? One second. Here. And then it says in verse 10, so it says in verse 4 that the Kohen shall take the basket and lay it down before the altar. And here in verse 10, it says, and now, behold, I have brought the first fruits of the land, which you have given me, Yahweh, and you shall lay it down before Yahweh your God, and you shall bow down, you shall prostrate yourself before Yahweh your God. So in verse 4 it says the Kohen takes it and lays it down, and here it says you shall lay it down and then you shall prostrate yourself. So Robert Alter says that it gets laid down twice. I don't think that's the case. I don't think that's the way biblical Hebrew works. I think probably my guess as to what's going on is when it says it the second time, it's referring back really to the time that the Kohen took it and laid it down. But you're doing it by proxy. Because you gave it to the Kohen, in a sense, you're laying it down. It's just referring back to that. So you give it to the Kohen, you say this phrase, and then you bow down. And so, in a sense, because the Kohen has laid it down in front of the altar, you've essentially, by proxy, laid it down in front of the altar. That's my take on it. But okay, let's move on. Close this out first of all. So that's the end of that paragraph, the first fruits basket. Any questions? Any comments? All right, Surreal, no problem. Don't drive yourself crazy, but if you can get a hold of it, boy, would I love to read something like that. Okay. So that's the end of that. Any questions? Any comments on what we learned so far? No. In that case, let's move on. And now we're going to go to what's called the Ma'aser, the tithes. So Ma'aser or Ma'asar, asar or ma'aser. It comes from the Hebrew word eser. Eser means 10. So it's talking about giving 1/10 of your produce away. The English word for that is tithe. Tithe is also related to the word tenth. Tithe, tenth, you can hear the similarity. So the etymologies are not the same. Tithe is related to 10 or tenth. Ma'asar is related to eser or 10. And but the idea is the same in each language. Tithe means a tenth. So verse 12, Deuteronomy 26:12. Ki fi chale la'aser et kol ma'asar tivu'atcha be'shana hashlichit shnat hama'aser. So let me translate up to there. So when you finish to tithe all of your tithings, all of the tithings of your produce in the third year, which is called the year of the tithe, or the year of the tithing, the year of the tithes, maybe. So there's this third year in a 7-year cycle. The agricultural cycle, remember, in Israel it's a 7-year cycle. There are 6 years of regular planting, gathering produce. And the 7th year is a Shabbat. That's Leviticus chapter 25, what is usually called the Shemitah year in modern Hebrew, but it's not called that in the Tanakh. It's called the Shabbat. So just as every 7th day we rest, every 7 years, according to Leviticus chapter 25, the land of Israel rests. And in that 7th year, you don't do any planting or any sowing, any planting. You live off whatever naturally grows out of the land that year. And that goes on for 7 cycles. It's just such fascinating stuff. But it goes on for 7 cycles. So the 7th year, the 14th year, up until the 49th year of the cycle. And then the 50th year is the Jubilee year. So the 50th year is the 49th year and the 50th year. On both of those years, there's no planting, there's no sowing. So for 2 years straight, you're eating off the produce of the land that naturally grows, and you're letting the land rest at that point for 2 years. And then the cycle starts again. Another 49 years, and then the 50th year Jubilee, and then it starts again. The obvious thing to point out is that this is closely related or mimicking the cycle between the Passover and Shavuot, or more specifically, the bringing of the Omer offering and Shavuot. So after you're supposed to bring the Omer offering on the day after the Shabbat, and then you count 7 Shabbats. So just like you count 7 cycles of 7 years for the Shemitah year, we'll call it the Shemitah year because that's what it's usually called. And then the 50th year is a Jubilee year. So after the Omer offering, you count 7 Shabbats. That's 49 days. And then the 50th day, which is then going to be a day after Shabbat, or what we would call a Sunday. Then you celebrate Shavuot, where you bring a new offering. It speaks of a mincha chadasha, a new offering to Yahweh, which is 2 loaves of wheat bread. So then you celebrate the first fruits of the wheat offering. So just as between the Omer offering and Shavuot, there are 7 cycles of 7 days, and that's 7 weeks basically. That's why the holiday is called Shavuot. Shavuot means weeks, and it's related to the word Sheva. Sheva means 7. So 7 a week is a Shavua, is a cycle of 7 days. 7 cycles of 7 days, 49 days. Then the day after that is the 50th day. That is Shavuot. Likewise, 7 cycles of 7 years. Each 7th year is a Shabbat, just like between the Omer offering and Shavuot. Each 7th day is a Shabbat. It's the Shabbat that we're celebrating today, for instance. And so the 7 cycles of 7 years, each 7th year is a Shabbat. The land rests. Just as we rest on the 7th day, the land of Israel rests every 7th year. And then the 50th year is the Jubilee year. And you shall proclaim freedom throughout your land. Torah Yikra Ba'artzecha. So you shall proclaim freedom throughout your land. That phrase is, for all of you Americans may know, is inscribed on the Liberty Bell. But that actually comes. That is actually a quote from Deuteronomy 25. Let's see. I don't remember the exact verse, but let's find it. Let's do it this way. I don't mean Deuteronomy 25. My mistake. Leviticus 25. So Leviticus 25. We'll just go to the English for a second. The year of the Jubilee. So here, count off 7 Sabbath years, 7 times 7 years. So the 7 Sabbath years amount to a period of 49 years. Then have the trumpet sounded everywhere on the 10th day of the 7th month. On the Day of Atonement, sound the trumpet throughout your land. Consecrate the 50th year and proclaim liberty throughout your land, throughout the land to all its inhabitants. Here it is. Okay. And in the Hebrew, so that's Leviticus 25:10. And in the Hebrew, and you shall proclaim freedom throughout the land to all its inhabitants. That is what is inscribed on the Liberty Bell in Philadelphia. And this comes from Leviticus chapter 25, verse 10. So, let me see if there are any comments here. Statue of Liberty is ISIS hidden in plain sight, Michael, just like the bull with Saturn in Rockefeller Center. Oh, is it? No kidding. I wouldn't doubt it. It was a good gift from France. Maybe. Who knows? We need to make a movie called Year of the Tithe. Okay. So when is Israel's next year off for crops? So they reinstituted, or they attempted to reinstitute, this Shemitah cycle, the 7-year cycle. I think it was in the early 1900s. And if I'm not mistaken, it was, I think last year was ended the Shemitah year. So I think it was a year ago ended it. I'm not sure. I'd have to look it up, but you can look it up. You can look up Shemitah year, Shemitta year in Israel, and it'll come up. So they're trying. It's kind of a somewhat feeble attempt, but it's better than nothing. They're trying to recreate this agricultural cycle, although they don't really allow the land to rest every 7th year. So that's another story, which we won't get into now. So right. So how did we get here? Yeah, we're talking about the 3rd year. So the 3rd year is called Shnat Ma'asar. The 3rd year is called the tithing year, the year of tithing. And I was trying to explain what that phrase, the 3rd year, means. It means the 3rd year within the 7-year cycle, within the 7-year agricultural cycle. So on this 3rd year, when Natata, not Tata, la lewi, la ger, wa la yatom, u la almana, wa akhlu. So in this 3rd year, in this tithe year, this Shnat HaMa'asar, this year of tithing, you shall give the tithe to the Levite, to the ger. So the Levite, we know what that is. The ger is the sojourner, or what we would call in modern English the convert, the one who comes from far away to join the nation of Israel. The yatom is the orphan, the almana is the widow, and they shall eat it in your gates. We've spoken about many times what the word "in your gates" means. It's in your cities, in your territory, among you, and they shall be their belly shall be filled, they shall be satisfied. So this 3rd year, on the 3rd year, you give your tithes to the downtrodden, those who are the underprivileged, which we've seen many lists in various contexts of which groups are part of, constitute the underclass in Israel, the ones who are just by their status are economically disadvantaged, and that here includes the Levi. Why the Levi? Anybody? Why is the Levi considered an underprivileged class? Economically speaking, that is. Obviously, they're part of the leadership of the nation. But why are they called here? Heter Mechira, rabbis create. Yep, exactly. Itan. Why are they here? Considered an underprivileged class? Anybody? Well, it's because they don't have an inheritance in the land of Israel. They're not given a land inheritance. So they cannot grow their own crops. They are given Levitical cities, and then they're given a province outside of the Levitical cities to grow some crops, but they don't have a tribal inheritance in the land, or inheritance in the land like the other tribes do. So they're often, when it comes to economics, they're often considered a class that needs to be supported through the charity of the rest of the nation. The ger, that's what we would call the convert, the person who leaves his own people to come join Israel permanently. Why is that? Why is the ger considered an underclass? Because when he comes to the land of Israel, he also does not have or get a land inheritance. He also has no family connections for the most part. He's coming from far away. And in a society like ancient Israel, which is everything's based on family, extended family, clan, tribe, then it's basically like, you're just like a lone wolf among the various packs of wolves. Maybe that's not a good analogy. I don't want to call it the clans of Israel packs of wolves, but you get the idea. The yatom is the orphan. So this is someone who's without parents for obvious reasons in a society which has such a great emphasis on family, extended family, clan, tribe, that such a person would be disadvantaged. The almanah is the widow. So again, the widow, it's not like in modern times where a single woman could go out and become a manager at a Citibank or something like that. If you were a widow and you didn't have children, that's really kind of what it's referring to. But if you were a widow, you also were in a very precarious situation because you were not attached to a family. Basically, all of these people here, with the exception of the Levites, were not attached to families. They didn't have families, extended families. And the Levite didn't have a land inheritance. So on the third year, the tithes go to these underclasses, these economically disadvantaged classes within Israel. And they shall eat it among you, meaning now, you let them dwell among you, right? That's another thing you're providing for them. You're giving them also, you're letting them be among you. You're not causing them to be some kind of outcasts. And they shall be satisfied from it. So basically, you fill their bellies on the third year. Verse 13. And not only on the third year, ostensibly the produce that you give them on the third year can last for a couple of years because it's a 7-year cycle. Verse 13. And here's another phrase. And you shall say before Yahweh your God, Bi'arti, Kodesh, min habayit, וגם נתתיו ללוי, לגר, ליתום ולאלמנה, ככל מסוותך אשר ציוויתני, לא עברתי ממסוותיך ולא שכחתי. So you shall say before Yahweh your God. So bi'arti kodesh min habayit, literally I've burnt out, but it means I've eradicated or I've removed all of the holy items from my house, the holy foods from my house. I'll explain what that means in a second. And not only that, but I've given it to the Levite, to the convert, the orphan, the widow, according to all that you have commanded, according to all of your commandments which you have commanded. Lo avati mimitzvotecha velo shachachti. I have not transgressed your commandments, and I have not forgotten. So what does it mean? I've eradicated the holy foods. Well, the tithes each year belong to someone. They're considered kodesh. They're considered the dedicated. They're dedicated to God. So kodesh means holy or set apart for God. It's kind of the opposite of hakodesh. It's lahakdish is the opposite of lahrim. So it's set aside for good for God. And so each year, 1/10, the first 10th of the produce goes somewhere. In the third year, this produce, this 10th, this first tenth of the produce that's set aside for Yahweh goes to these underprivileged classes. That's essentially what it's saying here. In this third year of the 7-year cycle, the Kodesh, the holy foods, or the food set aside for God, the first tenth, or the first fruits, the first tenth is always set aside for God. But in the third year, the way you set it aside for God is you give it to the poor, you give it to the underclasses. Okay? And then it goes on. Lo achati ba'oni mimenu ולא ביארתי ממנו בטמא, ולא נתתי ממנו למת, שמעתי בקול יהוה אלוהי, ועשיתי ככל אשר ציוויתני. So I did not eat of it. Oni, usually translated as in mourning, and I did not lo bi'arti mimenu b'tameh, and I did not eradicate or eat of it, or I guess eradicate it while I was in a state of impurity, because it is a holy item. It's set aside for God. You have to be in a state of ritual purity. And I did not give it of it to the dead, which we'll talk about in a second. That is probably speaking about this ritual that you'll see of like in some societies where they do ancestor worship. They'll set food before graves, before the dead, as an offering to the dead. In other words, I didn't do any of these abominations with it. I didn't do any disgusting things with it. But I did all that. I listened to the voice of Yahweh, my God, and I did according to all that he commanded me. And then you go on and you say, Ishkifa mima'on kadshecha, look down, mima'on, from your holy dwelling place, Mina Shamayim, from the heavens, U varech et emcha et Israel, and bless your people Israel, wa et ha'adama asher natata lanu, and the land which you gave us, asher nishpata la'avotenu, as you swore to our forefathers, Eretz Zavat Halav Udvash, a land flowing with milk and honey. So once again, and we'll go to some commentary on this. But once again, we see a phrase that needs to be repeated, what Robert Alter called a liturgy. So it starts here, Yahweh Elohecha bi'arti. So it starts here, and it ends here. So Deuteronomy 26, 13 through 15. Let's add it here. Deuteronomy 26, 13 through 15. Deuteronomy 26, 13 through 15. The Hebrew is Yate Kodesh min habayit v'gam netativ lalewi lager yatom la'almana. Good enough. I'll put a ... ellipsis, and this is on the third, or on the year of tithing, third year in the 7-year agricultural cycle. This is said, maybe that's enough. This is said, this is recited on the third year on the year of tithing, third year in the 7th year. Okay, I think that's enough. Boom, the end. Okay. Maybe I can capitalize this. What is this cat doing? This cat is nuts. Oh, what are you doing? What are you doing? You're crazy. Okay, so there we go. How it looks today with this 10th. I don't understand the question. Are you saying what are we? The Netherlands. Okay. Hey. Get cat issues. Okay, there goes one out. Sean, come here, you. What are you doing? How it looks today with this 10th? You mean do people tithe? No, there's no. I mean, one second. I got cat issues. Give me a second, please. Shoshi boy, get over here. What are you doing? What do you think you're doing, little boy? Huh? What do you think you're doing? You are the mischievous one. Go. Outside. Go. Okay, one more second. Be right back. Okay. We're back. Levites are established. I don't have ground and corpse. Should I give 10th to the Levites? I don't think so in this day and age because, in all seriousness, the Levites are no longer an underprivileged class, right? They are mixed in with Israel. They don't have the same, they have land as much or as little as any other Israelite in this day and age. The Levitical system is not set up. They're not, the idea is that their salary was paid by the rest of the nation because they were serving in the temple. The Kohanim and the Levites were serving in the temple. That was their job. So the parts of the sacrifices went to the Kohanim. The tithes went to the Levites, and we'll see also to the Kohanim. And so I don't think it's the same system. If and when that system gets set up again, then yes. But at this point in time, I just think, I'm sure there are plenty of Levites that will be more than happy to take a 10th of your salary, and they will, and there might even be some unscrupulous ones who will, point to this verse and then give you their IBAN number. But I don't think that you need to do it in this day and age. You're probably better off if you want to tithe than to give it to, the idea here, the underlying idea is to give it to those who really need it. So yeah, catitude is, you're darn right about that. Maria Nana Miknana. So, if you really want to tithe, then adopt a local Levite in your area. There you go. If you really want to tithe, then I would tithe to those who to causes that you really believe in, or to the actual poor and underprivileged. That's the idea of this verse. If and when the temple is reestablished, and do you have social help? Israel. Do you have social help in Israel? Is that what you're trying to say? Israel is traditionally a socialist country, so there are a lot of social systems built into place, but Jews are also kind of cheap. You may have heard. So you don't get a lot of money from the government at the end of the day. But no one starves in Israel. You will not see homelessness. You will not see people starving in the street. So, but there are plenty of Israelis that have a lot of economic problems. It's not easy economically to survive in Israel, as anyone who has ever lived there certainly knows. So sure. I mean, I'm sure you can find a lot of good charities in Israel, and if that's what you want to do, if that's what you want to tithe to, then I'm sure they will be more than happy to receive your money. Okay, so let's go back to our verses. Right. So yeah, so that's the phrase you say on this third year, this year of tithing. Let's get a little Robert Alter on this whole thing. See what he has to add to it. So this is happening. Second. Okay, so this is verse 13. So I've rooted out that what is to be sanctified, right? So we translated that as burnt out the holy things from the house. That's this over here. Bi'arta kodesh min habayit, or removed. I think I translated as eradicated the holy items or the dedicated items from my house is essentially the idea. So what does Robert Alter have to say about that one? Oops, where did we go? Come back, Robert Alter. The same verb bi'er that is repeatedly used for uprooting of evil from the midst of Israel is employed here to suggest how rigorous one must be in setting aside and not appropriating the tithe dedicated to the poor. What is to be sanctified? Good point. That's right. Bi'arta et ra Israel. I've eradicated or burnt out, cauterized the evil from Israel is a common phrase that we see throughout the Torah. I have not eaten of it in mourning. So the mourner, having been in recent contact with the dead, might impart ritual impurity to the foodstuffs that might be kodesh, sanctified for the consumption of the needy. I think he's correct about that. So we saw that as part of the phrase, the person, before he gives his tenth to the poor, says, oops, that's Leviticus 25, says, where is it? Right here, verse 14. Lo chalti ba'oni. I've not eaten it in mourning. mourning. So Robert Alter, I think, correctly says when you're in mourning, you might still be in a state of ritual impurity because, if you come in contact with a dead body, then there's, in order to be cleansed of the impurity that the dead body imparts, you have to go through the ritual of the red heifer, which we learned about maybe 2 months ago or something like that. And so when you're in a state of ritual impurity, you're not allowed to come in contact with these holy items. They are now dedicated to God. So anything that is belongs to God, anything that's in the province of God, of Yahweh, you have to be in a state of ritual purity in order to come in contact with it. So therefore, it's a declaration, as I think Robert Alter correctly points out, that you're in a state of ritual purity. In fact, it says that afterwards explicitly. I did not give it away, or I did not take it out, eradicate it from my house while I was in a state of ritual impurity. And I did not give it to the dead. I'm sure he'll have something to say about that. So basically, this is speaking about being in a state of ritual purity when you're tithing these items. Because the second you take this tenth and you say this is now dedicated to God, that now becomes a holy item. Anything that's holy, anything that's dedicated to God, to Yahweh, cannot come in contact with any person or anything that's in a state of ritual impurity. Okay, so I've not given it for the dead. Food offerings intended to nourish the spirits of the dead were common practice in both Canaanite religion and Israelite popular religion. It would be a violation of the tithe law to take any part of what is supposed to be consecrated to the needy and use it for an offering to the dead. Such an offering would also be proscribed because the person would become ritually impure by entering into a burial site. Okay, that's a good point. So this extra added point. So the first point we mentioned earlier. The second point, that if you give it to the dead, you're going to a burial site, and so you also have the possibility, or you also will. Well, no, it's not a dead body at that point, but you could come in contact with or come in the proximity of dead bodies, and therefore also contract ritual impurity. So it seems like the key here is to make sure you're in a ritual state of purity. That seems to be the emphasis here, and it's explicitly mentioned in this verse that you must be in a state of ritual purity when you consecrate, when you set aside this tenth and give it away to these underprivileged people in Israel. Okay, let's go on. From your holy dwelling place from the heavens. So that's verse 15. Right? So it says here, look down from the ma'on is a dwelling place, the dwelling place of your holiness, is your holy dwelling place, from the heavens, and bless your people Israel and the land which you gave us when you swore to our forefathers, a land flowing with milk and honey. So what does Robert Alter have to say about that? So he says this identification of the divine abode is important in the theology of Deuteronomy. The West Semitic peoples often thought of the gods dwelling on a high mountain. Like Olympus among the Greeks, in Deuteronomy, God is to choose one place where he will make his name dwell, and the audience would have recognized that as a mountaintop, Mount Zion. Okay, we won't get into that right now, but that place is not to be thought of as God's actual abode. Okay, so despite the fact that he's bringing in this idea of the documentary hypothesis and the fact that the Torah was assembled much later, hence this comment here, but he is actually making a good point that ma'on kachacha, the realm of your holiness, or the dwelling place of your holiness, is the heavens. But we also saw another phrase, which is, where was it? For instance, the place where Yahweh shall choose to make his name dwell. And this is ultimately revealed as the Temple Mount in Jerusalem. Basically, we'll just say as Jerusalem. So I think Robert Alter is making a very interesting point that there are two things. That yes, his name dwells on this earth, on the Temple Mount in Jerusalem, between the cherubim that are part of the cover of the Ark of the Covenant, very specifically, that's spoken about explicitly, that is the place from which basically he dwells on this earth, or his essence dwells on this earth, but he doesn't really dwell on this earth. That on this earth, his real place is up in the heavens. His ma'on, his dwelling place, is up in the heavens. Okay, God is in the Israelite tradition, no matter what anybody says, and believe me, you have all kinds of revisionists who will try to claim otherwise, but God has no physical form whatsoever. He's not in space, he's not in time, he doesn't have a physical form, he doesn't have a day when he was born or a day when he dies. He is outside of space and time, and he's outside of the physical world. So how do you have a God that's outside of the physical world live or have relevance in this physical world? Well, the Christians came up with this wacky, that's a nice way of putting it, this wacky idea that God gave birth to a son who took on the form of a human, and so therefore that is God's way of dwelling in the physical earth, in the physical world. That doesn't work in the Torah conception of God. So they have come up with, I won't say have come up with, they have explained a much more subtle idea, which is that Yahweh really dwells up in heaven, which is really a way of saying beyond the stars, outside of the universe, outside of space, outside of time. That's really what that means, because if you go out at night and you look up into the stars, right, you're really looking out to the edge and even beyond. You can't see it, but you're looking out towards the edge of the universe and beyond space and time itself. That's why we feel that such a sense of awe when we look up at the stars at night. So that's where God is, outside of space and time, outside of the physical universe, but yet he dwells among us. He dwells among human beings. And so the way he does that is that there is this place, which was eventually revealed again Okay, we'll talk about that in a second. Ethan. He has this place where he caused his name to dwell, whereas the only way I could say it is his essence on this earth emanates from that place. It doesn't have a physical form, but it's some kind of energy, I guess you could say, that emanates from that place. And very specifically, that place is, and this is explicit from the Torah, that place is between the cherubim on the cover of the Ark of the Covenant, which is in the tabernacle, which eventually became the temple, and the permanent place is on the Temple Mount Moriah in Jerusalem. So that's the difference. That's how God dwells on this earth. His some kind of essence or some kind of energy, which also has no physical form, emanates from the Temple Mount in Jerusalem, or from from between the cherubim on the cover of the Ark of the Covenant, which is supposed to be on the Temple Mount in Jerusalem. So that's a huge difference from the way the Christians deal with this idea that God is up in the heavens, but yet he cares about human beings. He lives among us. The Christians deal with it by coming up with this wacky idea of God giving birth to a son in human form who comes down to the earth. And so therefore God is able to dwell among human beings because he takes on human form. The Torah will not put up with such wackiness, nonsense. How harsh do I want to get? I think I have some Christian or Christian-leaning people who sometimes listen in, so I don't want to, at this point in time, to insult them too much. But let's just go with the word wacky, right? The Torah cannot put up with such a wacky idea. So the Torah conception, again, is yes, that Yahweh dwells up in the heavens. He dwells outside of the universe, beyond time and space. He has no physical form. He's not part of time. He's not part of the 3/4 dimensions of 3 physical dimensions and the 4th dimension of time. He's outside of all of that, but yet he dwells among us. And the way he dwells us is that some kind of energy, his essence, emanates from the Temple Mount in Jerusalem. And this, of course, reminds me of a famous psalm, which I think encapsulates this idea. I have to remember. Maybe we'll even play it. Let's see if it picks up the acceleration. And that is going to be Psalm number. 1 second here. Let's do it this way. 1 second. Kimi, Joseph Parduna. And it is which psalm? 1 second, and then maybe we'll even play the song. But let me make the point first. Let's see if it says what psalm it is. Darn it. Okay, let's do it this way then. 1 second. We'll Google it. Kimi. Me. 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 Fardal. So this is, there it is, Tehillim Perek Kuf Yud Gimel. So that's 113. So Psalm 113. Let's go to that for a second. One second. I don't see here. Here it is. Wait, that's not. Yeah, there it is. This is the phrase that I was looking for. So if we read, let's learn this Tehillim this Tehillah, the psalm together in the Hebrew, our first tangent, but I love tangents when we're studying the Torah because it gives us an excuse to study other parts of the Torah. Okay, so Ethan Avior says, I disagree. If you see the angel of Yahweh, you see Yahweh. His name is upon him. I hear what you're saying. I disagree with you. It's true that a lot of times that the angel, when people are speaking to angel of Yahweh, it's used interchangeably. Speaking to the angel of Yahweh and speaking to Yahweh, or Yahweh spoke to such and such, and the angel of Yahweh spoke to such and such. In the same story, you could see it switch back and forth there in any way, shape, or form. A Yahweh, an angel in Hebrew, as you well know, Ethan Aviot, because I believe you're fluent in Hebrew. The word for angel in Hebrew is a messenger, and in fact, I think that's exactly what it means in English. Angel, I think, comes from the Greek angelos, which means a messenger. So in Hebrew, it's a malach Yahweh. It means a messenger of Yahweh, a messenger of God, and therefore it's not the same as it's not God. It's just an intermediary. It's someone who's speaking, who's relating God's message, or who's relating the message back and forth between God and between Yahweh and the person that's being spoken to. That's the way I understand it. So right, let's go back here. So in Psalm number 113, Hallelujah, Hallelujah Avdei Yahweh, Hallelujah et Shem Yahweh. So Hallelujah, praise Yah. Everybody knows Hallelujah. Hallelujah Avdei Yahweh. Servants of or slaves of Yahweh. They often translate as servants, but it really means slaves. We were taken out of the house of slaves, the slave house in Egypt. We were slaves to the Egyptians, and Yahweh took us as his slaves, as his servants, except that he's a great master. We're happy to have him as our master. We couldn't have a better master. Just like as it's spoken about when the Hebrew slave loves his master and wishes to stay with him for the rest of his life, then the awl is put to his ear into the doorpost, and he becomes his slave for the rest of his life. And it says that slave loves his master. It also says his wife and his children, but he loves his master and wants to stay with him for the rest of his life. So Hallelujah Avdei Yahweh. So slaves of Yahweh, praise. I'm sorry, Hallelujah Avdei Yahweh. Let the slaves of Yahweh praise. Hallelujah Shem Yahweh. Praise the name of Yahweh. And of course, the name of Yahweh is important, right? We are singing out, we are praising the name, the actual name, Yahweh. Yehi Shem Yahweh Mevorach. May the name of Yahweh be blessed from now until eternity. In other words, forever and ever. Mizrach Shemesh ad mivo'o mihulal Shem Yahweh. From the place where the sun shines, in other words, from the east, ad mivo'o, to where it sets, to where it comes in, to where it sets, from the east to the west, meaning all throughout all of the world. Mihulal Shem Yahweh. The name of Yahweh is praised. Mihulal is the same as halalu. It's the same underlying root. Halal means to praise. Ram al kol goyim. Yahweh. Yahweh is dominant. Is dominant over all of the nations. Al Hashemayim kivodo. Up until the heavens is his honor, is his glory, or in the heavens is his glory. Miki Yahweh Eloheinu. And this is the verses I wanted to get to. Who is like Yahweh, our God? Hamagbihi Lashavet. And I can only paraphrase this in English, but it's usually translated as who dwells on high. Magbihi comes from the underlying root Gimel Bet He Gava, which means to be tall or to be high. Like, for instance, it speaks about King Saul, who was tall. I think it uses the word there, Gavoa. Gavoa Shechem Ahad Me'al I can't remember exactly the phrase, but I believe it uses it, but it means tall or high. So hamagbihi means he who dwells on high, or he who is high, and lashevet means to dwell. So it really is difficult to translate literally into the English, but it means he who dwells on high. He who dwells up in the heavens is basically what it's trying to say. Hamashpili lirot, but who comes down low to see. In other words, even though his dwelling place, on kacho, that's what we're seeing here. Mima'on kachecha mina shamayim, from your heaven, from your holy dwelling place, from the heavens. And we explain what that really means. Outside, beyond the universe. Same idea here. Hamagbihi lashevet, who dwells up on high, who dwells up in the heavens. Okay, amashpili lirot, and this is the same form that's very difficult to translate word for word, but it means who comes down low to see. And what does it mean to see? To see what's going on with his human beings, his human children who he cares and loves and cares about. So even though he dwells up so high that he dwells beyond the heavens, outside of space and time, nonetheless, he comes down to this earth, figuratively speaking, or not even figuratively speaking, not in physical form, but he comes down low to this earth in order to see what's going on. So even though his dwelling place is up high, he has a presence in this lowly earth of space and time and dirt and all of this stuff. And that's exactly what these words here are expressing. Hamagbihi lashavet, who dwells up in the heavens, hamashpili lirot, but nonetheless comes down to the earth to live among us, to see what's going on. And again, when we say live among us in the Tanakh, in the Torah conception, it doesn't mean give birth to a son in human form. It means his essence, his presence is on this earth, not in physical form, but as, again, I don't want to sound too hippy-dippy, but as an emanation of his energy from Jerusalem, from specifically between the cherubim on the ark cover of the Ark of the Covenant, which is supposed to be in the temple, on the Temple Mount, on Mount Moriah in Jerusalem. Okay, so Mashpili lirot b'shamayim uba'aretz, he comes down to see. I'm sorry, this is going to go back. Okay, I think really what's going on here is that ki Yahweh Eloheinu b'shamayim uba'aretz. Who is like, it's really beautiful. So again, we've said many times that phrases in Hebrew, in biblical Hebrew, can be interjected, or they can have between them a kind of interjected phrase, and that's what's happening here. So really, what it's saying here is mi ki Yahweh Eloheinu, who is like Yahweh our God, b'shamayim uba'aretz, up in the heavens and down on earth. Who is like him, up in the heavens and down on earth? And then in between that, we have who dwells up in the heavens, who dwells up high, but who comes down low to see what's going on. And that's what this phrase is saying. It's speaking about him existing in the heavens and existing on earth, that he dwells up in the high heavens. That is his ma'on kachecha. That is his holy dwelling place that we see here being spoken about in Deuteronomy 26:15. But nonetheless, he does have this, which we saw in Deuteronomy 26:3. Hamakom asher yivchar Yahweh Elohecha lishachen shemo sham. He has this place on the earth which he shall choose, which Yahweh your God shall choose to make his name dwell there, and that is speaking about the temple in Jerusalem. So even though he has this ma'on kachecha up in the heavens, he has this dwelling place up in the heavens, he has a place on earth that he will choose to make his name dwell. That's Jerusalem, and so therefore his dwelling place is up beyond the heavens, outside of space and time, but he has a presence. He lives among us. He literally lives among us, and his address, his place that he lives, is the Temple Mount in Jerusalem, or at least it should be right now. He's doesn't have much of a place to live there, but that's, in theory, that's what's supposed to be. And that same idea exactly is expressed here. Who is like Yahweh, our God, who dwells on up high, but who comes down low to live among us? Who is like him in the heavens and on earth, up in the heavens and down on earth. He's up there and he's down here. He dwells among us. He literally, Yahweh, the idea in the Torah is that Yahweh literally dwells among us. He's like a neighbor. That's why he has a house. His house was the temple until it was destroyed originally by the Babylonians and then later on by the Romans, the second temple. His house, that was his house. That's where God lived. So if you live down the road from the temple, you live, one of your neighbors is Yahweh. Literally. That's the idea. Yes, he doesn't have a physical presence in that house, but his energy emanates on this earth. He lives among us, and his energy emanates on this earth from Jerusalem. Anyone who has any kind of spiritual sensitivity, or even some who don't, if you go to Jerusalem, you will feel that. You will absolutely 100% feel that. I remember, I can tell from my own personal experience that way back in the early 90s, the first time I ever came to Israel was June 23rd, 1993. I'd never been to Israel before in my life. I honestly, in my entire life, never had much interest in Judaism. I grew up, as I've said many times, in a conservative Jewish family in the suburbs of New York, and my interests were, quite frankly, just baseball, sports, typical, American or maybe Jewish American suburban lifestyle. I was dragged to synagogue as a child against my will. It was one of the most, I hated it at synagogue. So all I did was just make trouble and get into a lot of trouble with at the synagogue. I was, constantly making mischief. I mean, I didn't like burn the place down or anything like that, but I was constantly making mischief. And I had no, okay, well, you'll tell us one of these days, Ethan, but we can talk about that afterwards. Or if you want to say something, you're welcome to come on to the broadcast and give your point of view. I'm more than happy to hear it. So at any rate, and I really had no interest in Judaism. I grew up going to Hebrew school 3 times a week, and typical conservative Jewish 1980s kind of suburban New York Jewish existence. Nothing special about my Jewish education growing up. I had a bar mitzvah when I was 13, and then I had no interest in Judaism after that until I was in college, and then a bunch of different things happened, which made me start thinking about the meaning of life and all that kind of stuff. And eventually I found my way back to religion. But my point was that, so once I started getting more into Judaism in my mid-20s, then at a certain, or early 20s actually, then I started at a certain point saying, you know what? Actually, it wasn't at a certain point. It was very quickly. I said, if I really want to find out about what this Torah thing is all about, what God is all about, I got to get on a plane and go to Israel. And that's what I did. I just basically hopped on a plane and I went to Israel. And to make a long story short, I came back 15 years later, back to the United States. I lived there with some visits and stuff, but I basically never came back until many, many years later. And, my heart and soul are still in Israel. And so that is, and I'm not in the United States now, that's for sure. So that place is scary and getting scarier by the day. So the point being that the original point I wanted to make is that I went to Israel with no expectations. I didn't even know what I was going to experience there. I didn't know what I was going to encounter there. I was just kind of starting to get back, starting to get into Judaism a little bit. I started learning Torah with a local rabbi. I had a number of friends along the way who had influenced me and also, taken me to more like, religious Jewish places like 770 down in Brooklyn, the Chabad headquarters, and some Shabbat meals and a couple of Torah classes from rabbis and stuff like that. And I was just kind of getting back into it. And then I hopped the plane to Israel with no expectations whatsoever. And I very, very distinctly remember, I think I've told the story before on the broadcast. Let me go like that, although I'll probably forget. If I forget when we start learning again, if I forget to go back to the other display where you can see the texts, then please let me know, okay? I'll try to remember. But so I remember 2 things. I remember a lot of things, but 2 very distinct things that I remember is, and I'd never been to Israel in my life before. I didn't have any close relatives in Israel. My father she's since died, had a first cousin who lived in Israel and some other distant relatives, but I didn't have any close relatives in Israel. And I very distinctly remember when I saw the lights of Tel Aviv, when we came into land at Ben Gurion, I had this strange feeling that I wasn't going away somewhere, that I was coming home, and I was not looking for that kind of feeling. I didn't look to try to experience that. I was just hopping on a plane to kind of check out what Israel was all about, to kind of see what it was all about, and I didn't have any preconceived expectations as to what I would experience when I got there. And I distinctly remember landing in Tel Aviv and saying to myself, this doesn't feel like I'm going away from home. This feels like I'm coming to home. And I'd never been there before in my entire life. And I wasn't trying to make it feel that way. And I wasn't making it up. It was a feeling I had deep inside that I was coming home rather than going away. It was the strangest thing. And then another thing I very distinctly remember is that that first night I went to Jerusalem. So we landed in Tel Aviv, in Ben Gurion Airport. And then I went to Jerusalem with, I was in a program run by a yeshiva named Eshet Torah. And so they picked everyone up in a bus and we went to Jerusalem. And I just remember that night, so we went to the old city. The yeshiva was in the old city. They dormed us in the old city. And this yeshiva is still in the old city. But I remember staying up all night, going down to the Western Wall. I'd never been to the Western Wall before in my entire life. Went down to the hotel, and I couldn't sleep the whole night. And I just felt, I read a book. I still even remember the book I read. I read a book called Derech Hashem, which is the way of God by a medieval rabbi named Moshe Chaim Luzzatto. Fascinating book. Of course, now I think it's a bunch of baloney because it speaks about astrology and all this kind of stuff. But it was very fascinating at the time. I stayed up all night down at the hotel at the Western Wall reading this book, and I just remember feeling such a strong presence of God. It was like a light that was like a spiritual light that was like shining right into me and right through me. And I'd never felt that before anywhere else in the entire world. And I was, again, not looking for it. It just kind of happened. I wasn't going there expecting any of this stuff or trying to force any of this stuff to happen. But you feel, anyone who's ever been in Jerusalem and anyone who has that frequency, has those antennas up to catch those frequencies, you will feel such a strong presence of God in Jerusalem. It's like no other place in the world. The only other place I can kind of make an analogy of, and this is the opposite extreme, is that many, many, many years ago when I first got out of college, I went to visit a childhood friend of mine out in Los Angeles. And we decided one day to take a road trip to Las Vegas. And I was not religious at the time at all. And I remember getting to Las Vegas and I remember feeling this spiritual darkness just descend on my soul. It was like I just felt this darkness and this heaviness when we got to Las Vegas. And I'm telling you, I was not religious. I didn't even have a spiritual side or a knowledge of a spiritual side to me at all. I was basically just basically like an atheist at that point, and basically basically like a science-oriented, atheist, typical kind of American mentality. And I remember that. I remember feeling that feeling when we got to Las Vegas of this heaviness, this darkness is the only way I can explain it, that like descended on my soul. And I actually told my friend, we were supposed to stay there, I think, for 3 days. After one day, I said, let's get the heck out of this place. This place is something wrong with this place on a spiritual level. And I was not spiritually aware of at that point in my life. Anyway, so all of that is to say that Yahweh's presence he does live in Jerusalem, even though he doesn't have a house there anymore. We know that one of the things that Solomon says when he inaugurates, I'm sorry, it's not Solomon that says it. Yahweh comes to Solomon in a dream and says to Solomon, even if you get exiled, this is right before he inaugurates his temple, the first temple. And he says to Solomon, even if this temple is destroyed, if this house is destroyed, and you get exiled from this land, if you look in this direction or if you point in this direction and say your prayers, they will go up to me in heaven from this place in Jerusalem. So even though Yahweh's house is not there at this point in time, even though the Ark of the Covenant is not there, or probably not there, there's some who speculate that it's still buried under the Temple Mount somewhere. There are others who say it's in Ethiopia. There are others who say it's in, I've heard all kinds of different theories as to where it is. But the point being that even though his house is not there, the Ark of the Covenant is not there, the Levites and the Kohanim are not carrying out their service to Yahweh on the Temple Mount, you still feel the presence of Yahweh in that place without a doubt. And if you go there, you will see for yourself. Don't take my word for it. And that's why many people go there and they go a little bit cuckoo. That's why you have this Jerusalem syndrome. Look it up. I won't get into it now, but it's usually evangelical Christians. They go to Jerusalem. It's known. They go a bit crazy. They start dressing as Jesus. Sometimes they'll carry a cross around Jerusalem. It's wacky stuff. Go look up Jerusalem syndrome if you want to have a good laugh. It's not so funny. They actually take it pretty seriously in Israel because it's a phenomenon. It doesn't happen to every Christian tourist, but it happens on a regular basis. Okay, let's get back to studying Torah. So I've got to go back to this view. Boom, there we go. Any questions, any comments? Anybody? All right, let's take a break. Let me take a break for 5 or 10 minutes, and then we'll go for about another hour or so, and then we will end it. I'll put on a little bit of music. So we learned Psalm 113. It's this. And so we can listen to the Joseph Corduna version of that psalm. So let's do it, and we'll be back in just a couple of minutes. Okay, let's see here. So I've got to do this. 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 And this. And this. There we go. And then I've got to put this up. Banners. This goes up. Whoa, what happened? It goes up. That goes down. And off we go.
ירים אביון להושיבי עם נדיבים עם נדיבי עמו מי כהשם אלוקינו המגביל לשבת המשפילים לראות בשמיים ובארץ אוי מקימי מעפר דל מהשפות ירים אביון אוי להושיב המגביל לשבת המשפילים לראות אוי בשמיים ובארץ אוי מקימי מעפר דל מהשפות ירים אביון na 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 nay na 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 nay nay na 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 nay na 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 nay nay na nay nay na na Hashem Melech Hashem Malach Hashem Lo Leolam Va'ed Hashem Melech Hashem Malach Hashem Imloch Leolam Va'ed והיה השם למלך על כל הארץ ביום ההוא יהיה השם אחד ושמו אחד אוי ננאי 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 נאי נאי ננאי נאי 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 השם מלך השם הלך השם ימלוך לעולם ועד השם מלך השם הלך השם ימלוך לעולם ועד והיה השם למלך על כל הארץ יום ההוא יהיה השם אחד ושמו אחד אוי והיה השם למלך על כל הארץ הוא אחד אוי ננאי 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 נאי נאי ננאי נאי נאי ננאי Oy nay 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 והיה השם למלך על כל הארץ ביום ההוא יהיה השם אחד ושמו אחד והיה השם למלך הוא יהיה השם אחד ושמו אחד ננאי 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 Nay nay na na nay na nay na na nay na na nay na nay na na nay 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 na na nay 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 na nay oy nay nay na na nay oh שיר למעלות אשא עיניי אל ההרים מאין יבוא עזרי עזרי מעם השם עושה שמיים וארץ אל ייתן למות רגליך אל ינום שמך הננום ולא ישן שומר ישראל השם צילך על יד ימינך יומם השמש לא יקקה וירח בלילה, השם ישמורך מכל רע, ישמור את נפשך, השם ישמור צאתך ובואך מעתה ועד עולם. מאין יבוא עזרי, עזרי מעם השם, רוצה שמיים וארץ, תיתן לנו רגליך, על ידו שומרך, הנה ינום ולא ישן השם שומרך, השם צילך, על יד ימינך. יומם השמש יקקה וירח בלילה, השם ישמורך מכל רע, ישמור את נפשך, השם ישמור צאתך ובואך מעתה ועד עולם. שומרך, השם צילך, על יד ימינך. יומם השמש לא יקקה וירח בלילה, השם ישמורך מכל רע, ישמור את נפשך, השם ישמור צאתך ובואך מעתה ועד עולם. אוי 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 שיר למרן, אשא עיני ההרים, אוי מאין יבוא עזרי, עזרי מעם השם, עושה שמיים וארץ, אני אתן לבוא רגליך, על ידו שומרך. אוי 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 שיר למען, אשא עיני אל ההרים, אוי מאין יבוא עזרי, עזרי מעם השם.
בפריז וגם ברומא, ראיתי את שבעת פלאי תבל, בקוטב הצפוני וגם דרומה, אך אין מקום כמו ארץ ישראל. וחוליות של נוף יפות תמונות בזיכרוני עמותת של מצלמה, שלום לך ארץ נהדרת, עבדך דל נושא לך שיר מזמור, גם אם לעתים נודד אני על דרך, מה טוב לנדוד אך טוב יותר לחזור. זריחי המגדלים בירושלים, עוד השוק הצהוב, אני בתים בעדתי, את האביב ותרביב, את סבתי, את סבי, את חלב, את נרות שבת, את ים המלח מול אדום, ואשת צופה לסדום, ואת הקיץ רוח האלה. שלום לך ארץ נהדרת, על נושא לך של מזמור, אם לעיתים נודדתי על דרך, מהכחולים של הכנר והרקיע התואם מעט והרגשת הבית המוכרת בתוך אורכי זורמת כמו חשמל הרגלים והשמון הפרדסים שבשרון וילדים גן המושבה שלום לך ארץ נהדרת, עבדך נושא לך שיר מזמור.
Okay, we are back. Okay, welcome back to the World Alliance of Qara'im. This is Hakham Melech and Yaakov of the World Qara'im, music, John. And we continue our Torah study here. We are hello. Then we've got to do this. And we've got to do that. Window, Toyota. Boom. And there we are. Good to go. Okay. And then we've got to do that. And then we've got to do that. And there we are. We are back. So we were learning Psalm 113. Let's go back to Deuteronomy. And we just learned about the year of the tithes, the tithing year. Okay. And now we get a general exhortation to obey Yahweh's commandments. So that's going to take us through the rest of Deuteronomy 26. We're supposed to get up through 29. So that means we have 27, 28, 29. That probably ain't going to happen, but we will try our best. Deuteronomy, sorry, take a drink of water. So Deuteronomy 26:16. And remember, this is all Moses speaking. This is his second speech. His second speech. In Deuteronomy, he gives three main speeches: Sermons on the Mount, the actual Sermons on the Mount, or sermons in the plains of Moab. So second. Okay, so we're here in Deuteronomy 26:16. Follow along in Hebrew or English or your language of choice. And we have Hayom Hazeh Yahweh Elohecha Misawacha La'asot Et HaChukim Et HaChukim Ha'ele Wa'et Hamish We Asita Otam Bechol Livavecha Bechol Nafshecha. So today, on this very day, Hayom Hazeh, Yahweh, your God, commands you to do these statutes and these judgments. We have usually, is it 4? Chok, Mishpat, Torah, and what else? And mitzvah. These are usually the four words that, yes, they may have subtle differences, but they're often used interchangeably or together. They act as synonyms. Synonyms, remember, constitute repetition, constitute emphasis. So here it says, if you want to be technical, and it's not really clear what the differences are between all these words, but usually it's translated as to do these statutes and these judgments. But really what it means is do these laws and these laws. It's emphasis, it's repetition, synonymical, is that even a word? Repetition by using synonyms to emphasize, to create a feeling of emphasis. So do these statutes and these judgments, I'll translate it as, because that's the general translation, was shamarte wasitotam, and you shall keep them and do them with all your heart and with all your soul. So we have again this phrase that we see most famously in the Shema. Oops. Let's try that again. So in Deuteronomy 6, right? This is the famous Shema Yisrael, Yahweh Eloheinu, Yahweh Echad. And verse 5, love Yahweh your God with all your heart, with all your soul, and with all your means, is the way it's usually translated. So here we're told to keep and do these commandments or these statutes and judgments with all our heart and all our soul. So that is a phrase that is recurring. You see that a number of times in the Tanakh. With all your heart, with all your soul. Maybe translation would be your being. A nefesh is like your being. That they usually translate it soul. Okay. Verse 17. Et Yahweh emarta hayom iot lecha leElohim we lalechet בדרכיו ולשמור חוקיו ומצוותיו ומשפטיו ולשמוע בקולו. So you have declared, emarta is the causative form of amar. Amar lemor is to say. Amar means he said. Emarta means you have caused to say. But you have declared, that would be a good translation. Let's see how Robert Alter deals with. Well, let's go Everett Fox this time. So let's see, where is it? Everett Fox. So this is Deuteronomy 26:17. Oh, gotta go even more. Real close to the end. God. 235. Deuteronomy 26. Overshot the landing pad on that one. Yeah, Deuteronomy 26. Yahweh, you have declared today to be for you a God, to walk in his ways and to keep his laws, his commandments, his regulations, and to hearken to his voice. So he uses declared. So you have declared Yahweh today. And I like how he doesn't translate this as the Lord. He translates it as Yud Hey Waw Hey. So you've declared Yahweh today to be for you a God, to walk in his ways, to keep his commandments, his judgments, and to listen to his voice, to listen to what he tells you to do. Yahweh, and Yahweh has declared you today to be for him a people. I'm sorry, a treasured people. As he has spoken to you, or as he had told you earlier, as he had stated to you, Lishmor kol mitzvotav, ולשמור כל מצוותיו, and to keep all of his commandments. So, יהוה אמירך היום להיות לו לעם סגולה כאשר דיבר לך ולשמור כל מצוותיו. So he's declared that you are his treasured people and that you should keep all of his commandments. So this is the covenant. We are declaring Yahweh to be our God. Yahweh is declaring us to be our people, and what seals that relationship is the keeping of the commandments. That's the covenant we are bound by. It's what they like to call in academic circles a suzerain relationship. Yahweh gives us blessing and protection, and in return we give him our undenied or our undying loyalty, and we do that by listening to by doing what he wants us to do. It's a suzerainty relationship. You'll hear that word a lot if you listen to kind of academic talks about the Torah. And suzerain is the ruler or the leader, the king basically, and the subjects, and his subjects can enter this kind of covenant with the king, whereby the king offers them protection, prosperity, land, whatever else is part of the deal. And in return, the subjects swear their loyalty to the king, meaning they will listen to what he wants them to do. Okay, so that's what's being set up here. Yahweh is our Lord, our Adon, our master, and we are his avadim, we are his slaves. And to make you superlative, no, what's a better word? Dominant, to make you above, no, I'm trying to think of the right word. No, how do they translate here? Sometimes you got to go with the official. High, no, I don't like that one. To make the most prominent, I'll go with it. Yeah, I like that. To make you the most prominent among all, because prominence literally means reaching heights, means it's prominence in the technical sense is a measure of how high a peak rises above surrounding peaks. It's more complicated than that. Actually, it's part of my marine biology master's thesis, which I completed last year. I had to actually program up prominence I won't even get into it right now. It's very interesting. At any rate, so to make you the most prominent among all of the nations, asher asal le'ti'elah, which he is for his praise. That's tehillah. This word is you see under there. In the root there is hey lamed hal, get hallelujah. So tehillah means for praise. It basically means for his own praise. That's the way I would understand it. U'leshem u'litiferet liotcha. Okay, so for his literally for praise, for a name, and for glory. Or maybe it's speaking about the nation itself. It can go either way. Maybe it actually is speaking about the nation. And to be yourselves a holy nation to Yahweh your God, as he has declared. So, Letitcha Elyon, let me just read this for myself and parse it in my head. Letitcha Elyon kol hagoyim asher atila l'shem u'tiferet. Therefore, because God has made you prominent, most prominent among all of the nations, that therefore you will be a praise, you'll have a praise, a name, and glory. In other words, that will be your reward or your position your position among all of the nations. Yahweh has chosen you and has made you prominent among all the nations. That's, I think, the idea that is trying to be expressed in verse 19. Let's get a Robert Alter on that one, just for the heck of it. A little bit more. Come on, you can do it. Why is this thing so sluggish? Come on. Oh, God. Okay. One more. 16, 17, 18, 19. And to set you high above all the nations that he has made for praise. Come on now. For praise. Jeez, why do I not get a regular scroll bar? Okay, for praise and for acclaim and for glory and for you to be a holy people to, the Lord your God as he has spoken. Okay, so Robert Alter kind of has the same concept. Okay, so that's that. Should we get a little commentary? So verse 17, the verb ha'amir, we spoke about that verb. Let me close this out. It's the causative form of lemor. Causative means cause to say. So declare basically is the way ever. Okay. The verb convincing instruction is feel. Positive verb say often idea physically with the move toward confessions of principle and that section of Deuteronomy. Okay, so reiterating what we said earlier. Fine. Chapter 26. Chapter 26. We're going to go for another half an hour or so, maybe, and then I'm going to stop. So, now we get some really interesting stuff. A curse, I think it was a tablet or a scroll in Mount Ebal, which the archaeologists who found it related it back to Mount Ebal's traditional role as being the place where the curses were declared. And then we have, of course, Mount Gerizim. Well, we'll get to it. We'll talk about it when we get there. Okay. So any questions, any comments at this point before we go on to Deuteronomy 27? Interconnection is bad. Oh boy, here we go. All right. Let me just wait a second for it to get better. Is it any better yet? Signal horrible. Let me just wait a second until it gets better because it sometimes can fade out and then it'll just kind of fade right back in. So let me do a sound check. Sound check. Anybody? Can you give me a sound check? How are you guys hearing me now? Sound check. Testing 1 2 3. Testing 1 2 3. Any better? It's good now? Okay. All right then. Yeah, well, like I said, hopefully next week this will all be a distant memory. Starlink is coming. Okay, so Deuteronomy 27. We're talking about Mount Ebal. Let's go ahead and learn about this. Wa lemor. So both saying, now we have the elders of Israel getting in on the act. Shemor et kol ha-miswa asher anochi misaweh etchem hayom. Keep all of the commandments which I command you today. And this is like a whole big subject. It's what does it mean, the commandments I command you today? Is this meant to be taken literally? literally? Are we talking about the speech that Moses is given at this time? Is it more figurative, meaning all of the commandments throughout the entire Torah? We won't get into any of that right now. והיה ביום אשר תעברו את הירדן אל הארץ אשר יהוה אלוהיך נותן לך. Stop there. And so it shall be on the day that you cross over the Jordan River to the land which Yahweh your God has given you. Hakham מוציא לך אבנים גדולות וסדת אותם בסיד. So when you cross over the Jordan into the land which God has given you, you shall set up large stones. And you shall, how do you say this again in English? That white stuff, not pitch. What's the word I'm thinking of? Basically, you shall whitewash them, but there's a specific word, and I can't remember. Wait a second. Hold on. Let me check it. Lime, okay? There's another word I was thinking of. But you will cover them over. Basically, you're going to whitewash them. You're going to paint them white. I can't think of the exact word that I'm thinking of, but it doesn't matter. Plaster them, I guess, maybe. Plaster them with white plaster. Okay, so you're going to set up large stones, and you're going to whitewash them. Verse 3, وَخَطَبْتَ عَلَيْهِمْ את כל דברי התורה הזאת בעברך. So let's translate up to there. And you shall write upon them all of the words of this instruction, of these instructions, ba'avracha, when you pass over, meaning when you pass over the Jordan River. Lima'an asher tavo el haaretz asher Yahweh Elohecha noten lecha, in order that you shall come into the land which Yahweh your God is giving you. And it's Zavat Halav Udavash, a land flowing with milk and honey. We're always being reminded that God has given us this land. It's a beautiful land. It's flowing with milk and honey. Kasher diber Yahweh Elohei avotecha lach, as Yahweh, the God of your forefathers, said to you. So, when you cross over into the land of Israel, in order, maybe that you should remain in the land is the implication, but when you do this, you set up these large stones, you cover them with, you whitewash them, you paint them white. Verse 4, وَحَيَا بِأَبْرَخِمْ et ha'yarden taqimu et ha'avanim ha'ele asher anochi misawe etchem hayom b'har ebal v'sadta otam basid. And so it shall be when you cross over the Jordan River that you shall set up these stones, the ones that I just told you about, which I'm commanding you today, on Mount Ebal. Mount Ebal. On Mount Ebal, v'sadta otam basid, and you shall whitewash them. You shall cover them with plaster. Verse 5. Vanita sham mizbech liyahweh Elohecha, and there you shall build an altar to Yahweh your God. Mizbech avanim lo taniv aleim barazel. It shall be an altar of stone, upon which has not been wielded iron. Not iron. Yeah, iron. Okay. This is really still in the Bronze Age. Actually, maybe this is already the beginning of the Iron Age. So I was questioning if it's sometimes it's another. Okay. Anyway, neither here nor there. So you're supposed to build an altar of stone, and just like we're told regarding the sacrificial altar, that it's not supposed to be cut with, it's not supposed to be hacked. The altar, not the altar, the ramp going up to the altar is to be either made of stones which are natural. In other words, they're not hacked with a cutting instrument, or it's to be made of dirt. So it's the same idea here, that when you build this altar, you're going to make it out of stone, but it's not stone that you're allowed to, upon which you're allowed to wield any kind of instrument that would hack the stones into the shape that you want them. It's basically, you just take natural stones and you build the altar with those natural stones. Why? Up to speculation, but one could say that perhaps that this is what the idol worshippers did. That's always a good assumption. Whacking the stones with an iron axe is too violent. This is supposed to be a place of peace, even though animals are killed on it. So that doesn't really work for me. I don't know. We can look at some commentary. Those are usually the two explanations that are given. Let's see what Robert Alter says out of curiosity. So that's Deuteronomy 27:5, if he says anything at all. Okay. So this injunction to make an altar out of whole stones is in keeping with Exodus 20:25. See the comment on that verse. So let's do that. Let's go to Exodus 20:25 and see the comment on that verse. So this is Exodus 20:25. Oops. And you should make me an altar of stones. You shall not build them of hewn stones, for your sword you would brandish over it and profane it. So I'm sorry, I said it was a ramp. I guess it was the altar. Something doesn't make sense because the altar is made out of acacia wood, copper. I don't know. I have to go back and look at it again. Anyway, so your sword, English translations from Tyndale in the early 16th century to a spectrum of translations at the end of the 20th century have rendered this as tool. This context obviously requires an implement for hewing stone, but the Hebrew cherev patently means sword. Here, a kind of metaphoric stand-in for chisel and pointedly used because of its association with killing. Rashi succinctly catches the implication of the term. The altar was created to lengthen a man's days, and iron was created to shorten a man's days. Whoa. It is not fit that the means of shortening should be brandished over the means of lengthening. That's a very Rashi kind of explanation. But basically, this is relating to what we just mentioned, which is that the sword is an instrument of war, and so therefore it has no place in God's altar. That's a possible explanation. I'm not sure it's the only explanation. In fact, maybe we'll look at some other explanations. So this is so this is Deuteronomy 27:5. Deuteronomy 27:5. Let me go to the commentary. Gotta go to 27:5. Let's see if any of these. Sometimes these commentaries can be a little bit annoying, but sometimes they're pretty good. So Rashi propounds the theory that these stones are taken from the Jordan. Okay. There's nothing to countenance this theory in the words of the text. Typical Rashi, of course, is not. To them on hand, this, but the altar must be made of onion stones, such as they found upon the field. Christ, our altar, blah, blah, blah. And then we get Christian stuff. Forget that. Let's see. Nothing much there. Of whole stones, the stones were to be in their natural state as if a chisel would communicate pollution to them. The stony pile was to be so large as to contain all the conditions of the covenant, so elevated as to be visible to the whole congregation of Israel, and the religious ceremonial performed on the occasion was to consist first of, okay, so he mentions that the chisel would communicate pollution to them. Doesn't explain why he's saying that. Let's see. Okay, nothing much there. It should be an altar unto the Lord, an altar of stones. It should not. Okay, so the altar should not be curiously wrought because it would continue, but for a time. So maybe this is interesting. I never even thought of that. Not sure I agree with it, but it's an interesting take. If I understand what this is saying, he's saying that if you hew the stones, then they'll fit together tightly, and then the altar will last for a long time. But this altar was meant to be temporary because the true altar is going to be in the Ark of the Covenant, not here. That's an interesting take on it. Maybe we'll get one more. So the tool which would have polluted the altar, but we don't know why. Whole stones which no tool had passed, which was to be erected, and burnt offerings and peace offering, blah, blah, blah. So now I just thought of another idea. Maybe it's kind of like when you give a sacrifice to God. When you bring a sacrifice to Yahweh, it's supposed to be an animal that has never been under the yoke, that's never been worked, because it's not fit for service to God if it's done menial labor. So maybe the same idea here, that a stone that's been hacked, it's almost like it's been defiled. It's no longer fit for Yahweh because it's been worked by man, just like an animal that has been worked by man is not fit to be brought as a sacrifice. Just an idea. I don't know if that holds water or not, but it's an idea. Let's see if there are any others. The notion that this altar was to be built of the stones with the laws written upon them, or even a portion of them, needs no refutation, as it has not the slightest support in the words of the text. For according to these, the altar was to be built of unhewn stones, therefore not of stones covered with cement, in obedience with the law in Exodus 20:22. The reason for this is discussed. Okay, let's take a look at this guy discussing the reason. Oops. Which commentary was that? This is Hail and Delich, biblical commentary on the Old Testament. So 2022, we've got to go to commentary, and then we'll move on after this. But this is an interesting topic, if you ask me. So we've got to go to Delich. It is. I don't see anything being spoken about here. The general fundament, as Jehovah had spoken, they were not to make, okay, but simply to construct an altar of, okay. So he's saying, as Jehovah had spoken to the Israelites from heaven, they were not to make gods of earthly materials such as silver and gold by the side of him, but simply to construct an altar of earth or unhewn stones without steps for the offering up of his sacrifice at the place where he would reveal himself. So I guess we shall not make them the place with. I guess he's saying what I'm speculated earlier is that when you make idols, you hack materials to make the idols, and therefore there was to be no imitation of that act. The stones were to be unhewn; they were to be natural stones, so that's not like carving an idol. So we've heard a number of explanations that hacking stones is like carving an idol. We heard the explanation that if the stones were hacked and they fit together well, then the altar would be permanent, and it's not meant to be permanent. We heard the explanation that wielding a sword on it is an act of, representing an act of warfare, and it doesn't have a place on God's altar, which doesn't make sense to me because you're killing animals right on that altar. And we heard, what other explanations did we hear? I can't remember, the one or two others. So those are the various explanations. It's an interesting topic. I tend to go with this one, actually, that it has to do with the idol worship, that by hewing the stones, it's kind of like that's what idol worshippers do when they make their idols of stone. They carve or hew the stones to make their idols. Okay. However, let's move on. You're welcome, Mariana Miknana. I love doing this. So thank you for attending. Okay, so we are going to go over here and we're going to move on. But at any rate, so no iron instrument is to be wielded on this altar that you're supposed to build out of natural stones. And then we go on. That gets reiterated here. Evonim shelemoth tivne et mizbach Yahweh Elohecha. So with whole stones, just natural stones that you find out in the field, you shall build the altar of Yahweh your God. Ha'alita alao kolot liYahweh Elohecha, and you shall bring up onto it burnt offerings, holy burnt offerings, or offerings that go completely up in flames to Yahweh your God. This is, again, I've mentioned many times, olot is often translated as Holocaust offerings because they are hollow means whole or fully, and cost means burnt, like caustic, or maybe cauterized comes from the same one, caustic, but certainly caustic does. So holy burnt offerings to Yahweh your God. Verse 7. When zavachta shilamim ve'achavta sham, and you shall slaughter peace offerings, and you shall eat them there. V'samachta lifnei Yahweh Elohecha, and you shall rejoice before Yahweh your God. This is a phrase we've seen in a number of contexts throughout the Torah. Let me see it again here. Verse 8. V'katabta al ha'evonim et kol divrei Torah hazot ba'er etev, and you shall write upon the stones. So we have an altar, and we have also stones which are going to be covered in plaster, in white plaster. And on those stones that are covered in white plaster, so the altar is basically for celebration. You're bringing burnt offerings and peace offerings when you come into the land. And on the stones, these big stones that are going to be whitewashed, you're going to write, you shall write upon these stones all of the words of the Torah, be'er hetev, well, I would say be'er means extremely clearly. Well, the rabbis might actually use this right here to say meaning well understood or well explained, and they might use this as a polemic for the oral law. They don't often do that, but I've heard this verse brought as a polemic for the oral law because it says, hey, you're supposed to write them and explain the laws well, so that implies an oral law. But that's not what it means. Er hetev, I think it means written clearly. In other words, with good penmanship. Thank you, Ethan. And we can get commentary on that as well. Well, let's finish this off, and then we'll go back and get some commentary. We'deber Moshe kohanim halewiim el kol Yisrael lemor, and Moshe and the Levitical Kohens, the Levitical priests, spoke to Israel, saying, to all of Israel, saying, "Asket Shema Yisrael Hayom Hazeh Ni'eta le'am liyahweh Elohecha." So remain silent or shut up and listen. Something that you have to tell Jews a lot. If you've ever lived among them, then you'll have to say that a lot. Hey, just shut up and listen for once. At any rate, so be quiet, but it's not meant in that way. It's meant as, remain silent and listen, Israel. And here we have again Shema Yisrael. We've seen that phrase a number of times. So it's not only in Deuteronomy 6:4 that it says Shema Yisrael, it's elsewhere. Listen, Israel, today, Hayom Hazeh Ni'eta le'am liyahweh Elohecha. On this day, on this very day, you have become a people to Yahweh, your God. Ushamata b'kol Yahweh Elohecha. And you shall listen to the voice of Yahweh, your God. In other words, you will listen to you will do what he says. Wa'asita kol mitzvotao, mitzvotao. You shall do all of his commandments, and his statutes, asher anochi mitzawecha hayom, which I command you today. So this is what's going to happen when they go into the land. This is kind of again a summary statement. This is not referring to when they go into the land. This is referring to now. But when they go into the land, they're going to set up big stones. They're going to write all of the Torah, whatever that means. That's another discussion in and of itself. On these big stones, they're going to set up an altar of unhewn stones, stones upon which no iron instrument or metal instrument has been wielded for various reasons, possible reasons that we discussed. And they're going to build an altar, and they're going to sacrifice fully burnt offerings and peace offerings on that altar. And this is all when they go into the land of Israel, which will be in another couple of months from where they are right then and there. Okay. Wow, it's late. I think I better go into express mode, meaning just read through. You know the deal if you've attended these Torah studies before. So I'll just give I probably won't even give translations. I'll just translate where I absolutely need to, and we'll try to get to the end of this chapter, and then I'll probably end at that point, because we've been going at it for a little bit over 3 hours. No. Over 3 hours. Way over 3 hours, actually. Okay. We saw Moshe et am biyom hahu lemor. Moshe commanded the people on the day, saying, Ele ya'amdu levarech et ha'am al har grizim. Har grizim, so that the blessings, there's going to be blessings and there's going to be curses. So on har grizim are going to be the blessings. Boy, let's see, have we heard of har grizim somewhere before? Har grizim rings a bell. Oh, right. That's where the Samaritans say that the temple stood and is supposed to stand. You guys have all heard of the Samaritans. So Har Grizim is their 11th commandment, that the temple is to be built on Mount Gerizim. This is what they consider the holy mountain, not Jerusalem, but Har Gerizim. And this is where they live to this day. That's where their main settlement is. Each Passover on Har Gerizim, on Mount Gerizim, they sacrifice a lamb as a Passover offering. Okay, Ba'avrachem et Hayarden, Shimon, wa Levi, wa Yehuda, wa Yisachar, wa Yosef, Binyamin. So these are the ones who are going to be on Mount Gerizim. These are, quite frankly, the favored children. They're going to be doing the blessings. So we have Shimon and Levi. That's the second and third born of Jacob. Yehuda is the fourth born of Jacob. Yisachar is, I forgot what number, but also one of Leah's children. And then Yosef, strangely, is grouped together here. He's not broken up into Ephraim and Manasseh. So that actually constitutes the two half tribes of Ephraim and Manasseh, or the two tribes of Ephraim and Manasseh in Binyamin. So Rachel's two sons, Leah's third, second, and fourth son, and Leah's, and the concubines gave birth. I can't remember which number, but Yischar, another one of Leah's sons. So no sons of the concubines here. All of the sons of Rachel, and only two sons of Leah are missing: Reuven and Yischar and Zvulun. And Zvulun is missing, so they're going to be on the other ones. So these are the favored children for the most part. That's the bottom line. They get to do the blessing. And these will give the curse on Mount Ebal. Reuven, Gad, Asher, Zvulun, Dan, and Naphtali. So these are the less favored children. We've spoken about this many times. There definitely was a hierarchy in the family of Yaakov, for good or for bad. So they're going to be doing the curse. Reuven, that's Yaakov's firstborn, but he was thrown off his perch. We've spoken about that many times. Gad wa Asher, these is the leftover son of Leah. So all the sons of the concubines, the disfavored son of Leah, and then one other son of Leah, who's again one of the later sons. Okay. Wa'anu, haliwi'im, wa'amru. And by the way, so let's do a count here. So Reuven, Gad, Asher, that's 3. Zvulun, Dan, Naphtali, that's 6. And here we have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. Very interesting. Levi is not separate in this case, although they have a role, as we'll see, special role, as we'll see in verse 14. But they're counted as one of the tribes that are going to be doing the blessing. And Yosef is not broken down here into Ephraim and Manasseh. So we have a count of 12, but the count is different. Their role is to serve God. They're separate to serve in the temple, in the tabernacle. And Yosef is usually broken down into the two tribes of Ephraim and Manasseh. Here, the count is different. It ends up with 12, but Levi is included, and Ephraim and Manasseh are brought back together as Yosef. Okay. Wanu Levi'im wa'amru el kol ish Israel kor ram. So the Levites are going to be doing, they're basically going to be the MCs. And let me just see this. Okay, so here are the curses on Mount Ebal. Arur ha'ish sher ya'aseh pesel u'masecha to'avat Yahweh ma'aseh yedei harash usam basater wa'anu kol ha'am wa'amru amen. I'm not going to translate these. You can follow along in the English because I want to finish this chapter. Arur makle Aviu, we, imo, we, amar kol ha'am amen. Arur masig gvul re'ehu wa amar kol ha'am amen. It's very interesting which are included here and which are not. So moving the boundary stone of your neighbor is one of the things that anyone who does that is cursed here, preemptively. Arur mashgeh iwer anyone who causes a blind person to err to go in the wrong direction. Literally, it means literally here, but I guess it has figurative implications. Arur, mate, mishpat, ger, yatom, wa almana, wa amar kol am amen. Again, protection for the ger, the yatom, and the almana. Arur shochev im eshet aviu. Ki gila knaf aviu wamar kol am amen. Don't sleep with your stepmother. Arur shochev im kol bihama wamar kol am amen. Bestiality. Arur shochev im achoto bat aviu or bat imo, your sister, your half sister, or maybe your full sister. Amar kol am amen, but it's saying even your half sister. You're cursed if you sleep with even your half sister if you have a common parent. Which of course we know that Amnon did with Tamar. Arur shochev im chotanto wa kol am amen. Do not sleep with your mother-in-law. I mean, most people don't even want to talk to their mother-in-laws, let alone sleep with them. Arur make re'ehu basater wa amar kol am amen. Don't slay or injure. I think it means actually kill your fellow man in secret. Arur lokach, and this kind of goes back. Remember, we learned last week about the dead body that's found in the field and nobody knows how it got there, or the slain body that's found in the field and nobody knows how it got there. And then you have the whole thing where the elders go down into the place, and then they go to the nearby river and slaughter a bull there and say our hands did not cause this. Arur lokach shohad lahakot nefesh dam naki mar kol am amen. Don't take bribes in order to cause, basically, to put to death an innocent person. Arur asher lo yakim et divrei Torah hazot la'asot otam wa amar kol ha'am amen. And anyone who does not keep all of the words or the words of this Torah. So those are the curses. 28. I'm just going to, again, just read through. Little to no commentary. This is, now we get basically blessings. Oops. See any comments came up. Okay. So, wahaya im shamoa תשמע בקול יהוה אלוהיך לשמור לעשות את כל מצוותיו אשר אנוכי מצווך היום ונתנך יהוה אלוהיך עליון על כל גויי הארץ. He will make you prominent among all the peoples. ובאו עליך כל הברכות האלה והשיגוך כי תשמע בקול יהוה אלוהיך. Here are the blessings. Baruch atah ba'ir, Baruch atah b'sadeh, in the city and in the country. Baruch pri bitnecha, upri admatcha, upri behemtecha, shigar alafecha, u'ashtarot zonecha. We've seen these phrases before. They're always together. Shigar alafecha v'ashtarot zonecha. This is your livestock. Baruch tancha imishar. So Tanach, we saw before, the only other place this word, which means basket, appears was back in Deuteronomy 26, when we were speaking about bringing the first fruits in the basket, and then saying that long phrase, Arami Aved Avi. My father was an Aramean who was on his way, or might have been destroyed. Misharatecha, this is your kneading bowl. Underlying word here is Saor. You can see the third, fourth, and fifth letters. Saor. Saor is sourdough starter, and without getting into all the details, it's where we get the English word sour from. Sour. The English word sour can be traced back directly to this Hebrew word Saor, and I think even in that case, some of the etymologies even admit to that. They don't go and make up this Proto-Indo-European baloney. Okay. Oh, I will stay till the end. Okay, excellent. Yeah, we're almost done, Maria Nana Miknana. I know you have parachutes to pack and ferrets to play with, so I don't want to keep you forever. Okay, verse 7. Yiten Yahweh et Waivecha Hakamim Alecha Ni Gafim Lifanecha. Your enemies will be destroyed before you. בדרך אחד יצאו אליך, ושבעה דרכים ינוסו מלפניך. They'll come at you in one column and they'll flee in 7 columns. Verse 8. I love these blessings and the curses. The curses are harsh, man, but they, don't disobey God and they won't happen to you. Isao Yahweh itcha et haberacha be'asamecha bechol mishlach yadecha uberachcha be'aretz asher Yahweh Elohecha neten lach. So this is blessing in the produce. Asamecha is usually storage houses. They translate it as barns. Verse 9. Yakimcha Yahweh lo le'am kadosh ka'asher ve'alachta b'derachav. He will make you a holy people, as he swore to you. Verse 10. Ve'ra'u kol amei ha'aretz ki shem Yahweh nikra alecha ve'yar'u mimecha. So all the nations will fear you. They're going to see that God's name is upon you and they will fear you. והותירך יחווה לטובה בפרי בטנך ובפרי באמתך ובפרי אדמתך על האדמה אשר נשבע יהוה לאבותיך לתת לך. So he's going to give great, hotir means overflow you with blessings, בפרי בטנך, with your children, meaning the blessings of your belly, of your womb, blessings of your animals, blessings of your fruit. So you're going to have overflowing blessings in all of that which you want to produce. Yiftach Yahweh lecha et otzaro hatov et hashamayim latet metar atzecha be'ito ulevarech et kol ma'aseh yadecha vahilvita goyim rabim wa'ata lo tirweh. So he will open up, he will bring you abundant rains from the skies and you'll get very wealthy. And I love this phrase. You'll lend money to many peoples and you will not borrow from them. Isn't that ironic that later the Jews in the Middle Ages became known as moneylenders? And in fact, the more I study medieval Jewish history, and probably even before, but the more we see that so much of it, I won't say only medieval, but basically, let's focus in on the age of exploration. Many of the famous expeditions that you may have heard about from the age of exploration, like Columbus, right? Columbus's expedition to the New World was financed. We always learned in school was financed by Ferdinand and Isabella. Well, guess who lent Ferdinand and Isabella the money to finance that expedition? It was Jews. I think it was one Jew, I can't remember the name. Magellan, by the Jews. A lot of these expeditions from the age of exploration were actually financed by the Jews. It's really interesting stuff. And in fact, as the Jews were thrown out of Spain in 1492. Many of them fled. They fled to various places. Some fled to the Ottoman Empire. Some fled to North Africa, such as Morocco. That's when the Moroccan Jewish community, I think there were Jews there before, but that's when it really got a boost. And others fled to Portugal. And then they were eventually, in Portugal, they were eventually required to convert to Christianity. And if they didn't, then basically they were put up. Well, not all of them were put up before the Inquisition courts, but some of them were put up before the Inquisition courts. And so many Jews fled from Portugal to the Netherlands. And you could trace this. The age of exploration moves from Spain to Portugal to the Netherlands as the Jews moved to these various places. That's why, let's say, America was founded by Columbus, who was financed by the Spanish. Magellan his explorations occur a little bit later in the 1500s when the Jews were now in Portugal. And then you have, for instance, the founding of New York, which was originally New Amsterdam. Amsterdam is in the Netherlands. And that settlement was financed by the Jews who had now been thrown out of Portugal or now left Portugal. And many of them moved to the Netherlands. And then the Netherlands became a huge country for the age of exploration. In fact, now I know we have a someone from the Netherlands here in our study, so maybe he knows something about this. But it's very interesting that to relate this back to this verse here, you will lend money to many nations and you'll not borrow from any of them. And later on in the curse, we'll see that if you don't follow the Torah, then you will borrow money from the many nations and you will lend to none of them. So, all right. He'll make you a head and not a tail. You'll be only above and not below. Excuse me. Verse 14. Excuse me. ולא תסור מכל הדברים אשר אנוכי מצווה אתכם היום ימין ושמאל. Don't deviate to the left or to the right from that which I'm commanding you. In other words, לא תוסיפו ולא תגרעו. Do not add and do not take away from these commandments which I'm giving you. An important verse for the Karaites. ללכת אחרי אלוהים אחרים לעבדם, and to follow after other gods and to serve them. So those are the blessings. Now we get to the curses. They're pretty intense. Okay, we'll go a little bit longer. I shouldn't, but I can't resist. והיה אם לא תשמע בקול יהוה אלוהיך לשמור ולעשות כל מצוותיו וחוקותיו אשר אנוכי מצווך היום ובאו אליך כל הקללות האלה והשיגוך. So here are the curses for not listening, for not obeying the covenant. And many of them mirror the blessings. So here we have Baruch atah ba'ir, Baruch atah b'sadeh. Blessed are you in the city and blessed are you in the country. Here we have Arur atah ba'ir, Arur atah b'sadeh. Blessed are you cursed are you in the city and cursed are you in the country if you disobey. Arur tanacha u'misharatacha. Cursed is your fruit basket and your kneading trowel. Arur pri bitnecha, pri admatacha, shgar alafecha v'ashtarot zonecha. Cursed is your womb, the fruit of your land, and your livestock. Arur atah bivoacha, arur atah b'tzetecha, bivoecha ve'arur atah b'tzetecha. Cursed are you when you're coming, and cursed are you when you're going. Wherever you go, you're going to be cursed. Yishlach Yahweh b'cha et ha'mi'era, et ha'mi'uma, wa'et ha'mi'eret. We can sit and translate those words. B'chol mishlach yadcha asher ta'aseh. Ad hisham meddecha, until you are destroyed. So hamar'eh is translated here as cursing, mihuma, confusion, mi'eret, rebuke, until you're destroyed. Wa'ad avdecha maher mipnei roa me'alelecha asher azavtani. Verse 21. Yadbek Yahweh b'cha et ha-daver you're going to get, they translate it as the plague, and dever is one of the 10 plagues in Egypt. So in other words, you're going to suffer one of the plagues that I brought upon Egypt. Verse 22. Yakecha Yahweh b'shachafet u'b'kadahat u'b'daleket u'b'charchur u'b'cherev ובשיפדון ובירקון ורדפוך עד עבדך. Basically a whole bunch of diseases, and you'll be pursued until you are destroyed. והיו שומך אשר על ראשך נחושת והארץ אשר תחתיך ברזל. The heavens above you will be like bronze, and the land below you will be like iron. In other words, everything's going to dry up. I won't bring you your rain, I won't bring you abundant rain. Yiten Yahweh et mitar atzacha avak wa afar min hashamayim yered alecha ad isham dach. So instead of rain, what's going to rain down from the sky is going to be dust and ashes. I think we better stop. I'll go. Let's see how much more we have. Oh boy, it's a long one. I'm going to stop. Yahweh nigaf lifnei oivecha b'derech achad titzeh elav u'b'shiv'a derachim tanus lefanav. Lifanao. So your enemies, remember above, the blessing was your enemies will come out at you in one column and they'll flee in 7 columns. Well, here it's the opposite. You're going to go out against your enemies in 1 column and you're going to flee from them in 7 columns. So and you will be a disgrace, or let's see how they translate it. Here's Za'wa. Troublesome. Nah, I don't like that translation. You shall be a disgrace, an abomination, an embarrassment before all of the kingdoms of the world. And your dead and your corpses, your slaughtered bodies will be food for the birds of the sky and for the animals of the land, and there will be no one to scare them away. In other words, well, you get the idea. Okay, we're going to stop here because it's super late and I got to get going. Really fascinating stuff, but we're going to have to stop it here. Okay, so, thank you, sweetheart. I'm predominantly Polish descent. I hold no vengeance towards what my ancestors did. I treat everyone the same. In Poland, okay, there's a whole conversation going on. New York. Right. Okay. Scythians within. I don't know. I've done some looking into this whole thing where the 10 tribes ended up, and there's just so many different theories out there. I don't know. I can't follow. If you have something in specific, Ethan, that you'd like to share with me, then please feel free to, text it over. And by the way, anyone who's in this study who's not in our WhatsApp group, you should really join the WhatsApp group, and I'll post the link. Hold on a second. If I can grab it here, and then we're going to end for the day. Because we have a lot of really vibrant discussions there. Let's see if I can get the link. Well, you know what? I'm sorry. It's in the original description for the study. If you look in the original description for the study, you'll see the link for the WhatsApp group. All right, people, we're going to end here. It's getting late where I am. It's probably getting late where you are. So let me wish everybody a Shabbat Shalom and a Shavua Tov. We'll see you all be'ezrat Yahweh. We'll see you all next week. We're coming close to the first day of the 7th month. In other words, Yom Teruah, which the rabbis incorrectly call Rosh Hashanah, the New Year. There's no New Year in the fall. There's a New Year only in the spring. But that's what's coming up soon enough. So maybe we'll do some extra studies over that holiday, over that Chag. And I will speak to you all soon. I'm not going to end it with music this time because it's getting late here. And I got to start taking care of some things, evening activities. So, all right, everybody, thank you for joining the study. Please tell your friends. If you don't have any friends, tell your enemies. If you don't have any enemies, then, I don't know, tell yourself. But let people know about the study. It would be great if more and more people could start showing up, and then we can have a really, vibrant Torah study. I love doing these studies. It's my pleasure. It's the highlight of my week. And I wish you all, wherever you are, a Shabbat Shalom and a Shavua Tov. So Shabbat Shalom, Shavua Tov. See you all next week. Be'ezrat Yahweh.